Here we go. What? Hello. Happy Sunday. Bit of a random one for you today. Thank you for joining. The 30th of the 8th, 2020. Hermeticism and alchemy, Christianity, Greece, Egypt. Some hot off the press pages for you, about 40 pages. I've got a lot of emails and contacts regarding further information regarding the Corpus, Hermetica, Thoth, Hermes, the literature, the gnosis, dealings from antiquities. What have I looked at? What have I got? What do I think? Christians, Christianity, Jesus, Buddha, Enki, Enoch, Old Testament, New Testament. You are a very perceptive set of scribes here. So I've endeavoured to fill in some of the gap in that and incorporate what you have asked for. I've taken about 30 years of research in this area, all of the areas. When I say this area, it's not limited to, it's all to do with Hermes, Trismegistus, Thoth, Egypt, antiquities, Romans, Africa, tribal underpinnings of civilization in itself. It's a long spectrum. There aren't much definitive works here, but what there is an embellishment of our combined research as a family unit for the last 30 or 40 years, from the 80s, picking up from von Daniken's initial, studies of sky gods. So it's not for everybody, but it's for a lot of you. Alchemy, again, is an everyday occurrence. Cooking is the popular one, where you have your acids, fats, sugars, temperatures, conditionings, gellings, settings, and a desired result at the end of that. So we're not coming from an academic route either. This is not endorsed or supplied by or taken from anywhere which is established or in any way a union, an academic, and a foundation or anything like that. So with regards to sources, references, it's going to be hard because it's not on Wikipedia. It's a combination of our interactions and collections of homegrown WordPress sites and things, and obviously I've got names in here. It's going to be like a little bit of a Bonacci influence with the Italian and Greek and Roman mixture. So like a meal, I'm going to be putting in a lot of that. I don't speak Latin. I've got a front tooth missing, so you'll get this publication very soon, and it will be more relevant, the names and the Latin, the Italian. All right, I'm not fluent in that, and I will struggle with pronunciation. So without further ado, we're going to have a crack on with this and see how we go. It's a proofread. I like to proofread. I like to get it certain parts embedded in. So we are going to be live tonight with the legend Kevin. So that will be from 9:30. And we're going to continue then with this proofreading. Prophetic dissonance, prophecy in itself. If we look at how many prophecies there are, or prophetic dissonance, corpus hermetica, comparisons to life, and the element of alchemy will be expanded upon now. So some of you and myself, since we were small, we've had perceptions and extrasensory perceptions. We've opened things up and looked inside them. We've been curious. Alchemy for me has opened up a whole new universe and paradigm. The fact of the existence of this vast energy and of late literature. When I said we're going to find a language, a new language which is old, alchemy in itself is indeed a language, as you're going to come to be introduced to now. And this language, a silent language again, one of many, containing literatures and works and publications and great scholars that have led up to about the 1850s. So there is works and there is publications, and there's a lot here for us to go through. And it's a literature that is very seldom read or even understood. especially in today's modern 2020 academic mainstream context. And unions have made much use of it, but to their own ends and purposes, perhaps not always with the complete fidelity or consciousness to the intent of the actual tradition at hand. We will talk about these other approaches within the 20th century throughout this. We have a name now, the first of many, and to look at or read or consider reading Giordano Bruno, The Hermetic Tradition by Dame Frances Yates. Francis Yates' scholarship is very controversial. I think to get an overview of the landscape of alchemy, Corpus Hermetica, then that book is probably coming from 30 years of research as well, the best single book between the covers. So Giordano Bruno, if I was properly Italiano and putting it on, and that would be by Dame Frances Yates. It won't be pleasing to some factions, and we will talk about that as we move on. All of the strains of alchemical illusion and delusion that have always driven this intellectual engine. The one book that covered this territory, that's a good one to start with, and it will be hosted on splspro.com in the literature archives. Once I've uploaded it, I have a copy of that Giordano Bruno. Okay. Chin chin. Some of you may know the song by the Grateful Dead, in which the refrain is, "We need a miracle every day." I think any reasonable person can conclude that redemption of the world, if it is to be achieved, can only be achieved through magic. It seems too late for science. It's too late for Tory politics. While it's very interesting, every ancient literature has its apocalypsis, and in the Hermetic literature there is prophecy. I think it's in book 2, but it doesn't really matter. The prophecy is thus: a day will come where men no longer care for the earth. I haven't mentioned the publications that you can find and review as well to help you with this. The Kabbalion is number 1. The Hymns of Hermes is number 2. The Corpus Hermetica is number 3. When I've said it began in the Hermetica, when we've said there are stories of Christianity before Judeo-Christianity and before the Old Testament, there are furthermore to this as you'll come to learn in your discoveries. So a day will come when men will no longer care for the earth. All right, that's where we got to, the prophecy in book 2 of the Corpus Hermetica. And at that day, the gods will depart and everything will be thrown into primal chaos. Now, does that sound like another story you might have heard somewhere else? I just want to throw that in. The prophecy was very, very strongly in the minds of the strains of non-Christian thought that evolved at the close of the Roman empires, the later centuries, when we brought to you the collapse of the Roman Empire in itself, was it Nero and etc. towards the end, and how that was being run, and what fallacies it entailed. When you look back into historical time, it's when you reach the 1st and 2nd centuries after Christ that you then reach a world whose psychology was very much like the psychology of our own time today. It was a psychology of despair and exhaustion. And this is partly because Greek science, which had evolved under the aegis of democracy, atomism, and Platonic metaphysics, had essentially come to a dead end in those centuries. And we can debate the reasons why this may have happened. An obvious suggestion would be that it was because they failed to develop an experimental method, and so everything just dissolved into competing schools of philosophical speculation. I will keep an eye on the room and say hello, Quinn, Stephen, Yardi, and Eric. Nice one. Thank you for joining on this Sunday bank holiday bonanza. You've got some pens to get, some notes to make, and this document, version 1, as I'm reading now, proofreading, will be coming your way very soon, in association with the other documents that I've got that have accompanied the magic words and the Admiralty Maritime, Hocus Pocus, etc. A profound pessimism spread through the Hellenistic world, Hellenistic Greek, Helena, Hellenic, Helen in itself, Helen of Troy, Hellenistic world. Out of that pessimism, and in the context of that kind of universal despair, which attends the dissolution of great empires. And so a literature was created from the 1st to the 4th centuries after Christ. We've covered this before quite extensively, so with others and Constantine and councils and hippos and treaties and etc. pop up there, the canonisation of the Bible to be precise. This body or corpus of literature, corpse, French, Francais, before Francais and French we have the body corpus, the corpus hermetica, body of, so you can see where the lineage, the writings, the words have originated from and since. So the body corpus of literature was misunderstood by later centuries, especially the Renaissance, because it was taken at face value, literally. And it was assumed to be at least contemporary with Moses, if not much older. I'm not here to argue about the dates and the Egyptian deities, lineages and atoms, apep, arcanatons, but I would like to come back on this. And if those of you out there that are good with the continuum of, bear these bits in mind. The Renaissance view of Hermeticism was based on a tragic misunderstanding of the true antiquity of this material. And there are people, hopefully none reading this document here or listening to this video, proofreading, notarizing this document, who still would have us believe that this literature may antedate the Mosaic law. That is as old as dynastic Egypt. But this is a seemingly indefensible position, yet to be confirmed from this standpoint of view right now. In the early 16th century, father and son, Isaac and Marek Casaubon, showed through the new science of philology that this material was in fact late Hellenistic, is why I say that. Now, I can't prove yay or nay, I'm just going on the information. It's yet to be, in our opinion, for us, cemented in. I am not a classicist or an academic in the Viconian sense, in the sense that there is a certain strain of thought that always wants belief that the oldest stuff is always the best stuff. And that not necessarily is the case, alright? That's a little deception there. Just because it's older or predates something doesn't mean to say it's necessarily better. Less is more, etc. To my mind, what is amazing is how recent everything seemingly is. I have no sympathy with the fans of Lost Atlantis or with any kind of that malarkey. I'm sorry, move away. It's not your time. To me, what is amazing is how it all seems to be less than 10,000 years old. Anything older than, say, 10,000 years puts us into the realm of an aceramic society, relying on chip flint for its primary technologies. What the Hermetic corpus is the most poetic and cleanly expressed outpouring of ancient knowledge that we knowingly possess at this current moment, I would like to argue. It was reworked in the hands of these late Hellenistic Greek peoples. It is essentially a religion of the redemption of the earth via magic. What? Christians, prayer, thought, love, emotion. Hold on tight. We're going on a little roller coaster this afternoon. 30 years worth of research brought to you in the form of this. It's got great depths to a tradition called Sevian or Sabian, which means Mandaeanism. Mandaeanism was a kind of proto-Hellenistic gnosis that laid great stress on the power of life, Zoa, and bios. Bios is in your computer startup, B-I-O-S, bios. In that sense, it has a tremendously contemporary ring to it. We also are living in the twilight of a great empire, and I don't particularly mean the United Kingdom, the Federation, the American or the Holy Empires. I mean the empire of New Age, modern, lateral, dare I say, just European, one consciousness thinking, moving towards a singularity of unilateral, unified thought, belief, conscious, especially at this time, a great many minds are indeed questioning and thinking and looking at the data and the information. So we are in the area, look at above and what is coming in 2025. It could have been previously called a Protestant Reformation and the rise of the fourth industrial revolution to some extent. The empire in short of science. Science has indeed exhausted itself and becoming mere techne. It is still able to perform its magical tricks, but has no claim on a metaphysical existence, with any meaning. Because of the paradigm of rational understanding that was pursued by science, it has pushed so deeply into the phenomenon of nature that the internal contradictions of the method are now exposed for all to see. And you are seeing very well without this one. And in discussing alchemy, especially, you and I are going to meet with the concept of what is called the coincidentia oppositorium. Now that is Latin, coincidentia oppositorum, which is translates into Babel as the union of opposites. I like also the law of equal exchange, but that's not for now. Coincidia oppositorium, I hear you say. Bless you, the union of opposites. This is an idea that is completely alien to science right now. It's the idea that nothing can be understood unless it is simultaneously viewed as being both what it is and what it is not. So we would then say, isn't that like quantum theory, Dave? Indeed it is. It is like quantum theory. When I have said, could the quantum existence and paradigm and unified flux field of non-locality be quite, simply compared to the Holy Spirit? This is why we think these new brand up to the minute dates an idea that's alien to science, the idea that nothing can be understood unless it is simultaneously viewed as both being what it is and what it is not, here and there, not there. I'll leave it there. In an alchemical symbolism, we will meet again and again the symbolic expression of the coincidentia oppositorium. It may be in the form of a hermaphrodite. It may be in the form of the union of Sol and Luna. It may be in the form of the union of Mercury with lead or with sulfur. In other words, alchemical thinking is thinking that is always antithetical, always holds the possibility of, by a mere shift of perspective, its opposite premise will gain power and come into focus. Shamanism. There's a book called The Forge in the Crucible by Mercy Leon. It's very hard to find. If you find that PDF, the title is Forge in the Crucible, and it's by Mercy Leon. Let me know, please, because I haven't got a copy of that. In which he shows the shaman is the brother of the smith, and the smith is the metallurgist, the worker in metals. So this is really where I'd argue alchemy has its true roots. In a sense, alchemy is older than the Trismegistus corpus. It come with the creation of the universe and all things, you see. So it's a scientific, immovable, fixed law of elementary nature. Elementary, my dear sovereigns and initiates and scribes. So in a sense, alchemy is older than Trismegistus corpus. It wasn't invented by him. A bit like mathematics, we found it. We didn't, man, intelligence, invent the maths. We found it. And then it is also given a new lease on life by the philosophical underpinnings which the Corpus Hermeticum provides. Alchemy. The word alchemy can be traced back to mean Egypt or a blackening, and in its earlier strata it probably refers to techniques of dyeing, meaning the colouring of cloth, gilding of metals, and the forging and working of metals. We who take this for granted have no idea how mysterious and powerful this seemed to ancient people, and in fact it would seem to us if we had anything to do with it. The megalithic blocks of Lebanon, the amazing 12 foot long ingams of India that with a half a millimetre precision of accuracy to a half a degree or 1 degree precision with a 15 octagonal shape, 16 shaped sides of 12 foot long with the precision of. So just bear that in mind as we progress here, all right, when we're talking on these realms and lines. I mean, how many of you out there are actually welders, of casters of metal? It is, when you see it happening, the liquids and the moving and the transformation. Sheffield, the city of steel. It's a magical process. It was, sorry, the city of steel. And it's forge masters, all right, masters of the forge, says it there in its name. So to take, for instance, cinnabar, a soft red ore, and by the mere act of heating it in the furnace, it will sweat liquid mercury onto its surface. We have unconsciously imbibed the ontology of science, where we have mind firmly separated out from the world. We take this for granted, It's effortless because it's the ambience of the civilization that we have been born and cast unto asunder. In an earlier age, some writers would say a more naive age, and I wonder about that. In an earlier age, mind and matter were seen to be alloyed together through nature, so that the sweating of mercury out of cinnabar is not a material process. It's a process in which the mind, the ment, and the observations of the metalworker, think of the double slit experiment, maintain an important role. Let's talk a moment about Mercury. The spirit Mercurius is almost the patron deity of alchemy. Mercury, red, warlike planet, and mercy. Many things to say about that. And you all know what Mercury looks like. Let's talk about Mercury, the liquid now. Quicksilver at room temperature. A silvery liquid that flows. It's like a mirror for alchemists. And this is just a very short exercise in alchemical thinking. For the alchemist, Mercury was mind itself, in a sense. And by tracing through the steps by which they reached that conclusion, you can have a taste of what alchemical thinking was truly about. May I try to guide you through that? So Mercury takes the form of its container. If you pour mercury into a cup, it will take the shape of, the cup or the test tube or whatever you put that mercury into. This taking the shape of its container is a quality of the mind, and yet here it is present in a flowing silvery metal. The other thing Mercury is a reflecting surface. You never actually see Mercury. What you actually see is, the world that surrounds it. If any of you are fans of the 1986 film Flight of the Navigator, where Compliance, the human boy, gets into the alien spaceship, and he's got to go on a mission, and he gets to fly that mirrored, teardrop shaped, completely reflective. It reminded me as a bead of mercury. I used to be fascinated with things that were poisonous when I was younger, and looking into such things as insides of batteries, thermometers, burning and melting things, gluing things, chemicals and substances, smashing things with hammers to get the inner workings, batteries, transformers, cogs, radios, hair dryers. So when you split mercury up, when you pour it onto a surface and it beads up, each bead potentially can return back and become one. Each bead is viewed as a little microcosm of the world, but yet the mercury flows back together into one unity, much like water droplets. Mercury is fascinating to some. Liquid, magnet, liquid propulsion, India, Vimanas comes into play. Fluid, liquid, fluid dynamics and so forth, propulsion, I hear you. So it's a phenomenon of the physical world, and the mind is also a phenomenon, as in the Cartesian distinction, which is between the res extensa and the res virons. Virons. This is the great splitting of the world into two parts, the duality, res extensa and the res virons. The yin and the yang. The interesting thing about the yin and the yang is not the yin and it's not the yang. It's the interesting, the shape of the S that divides the two teardrop shapes there. That surface that runs between them, the rivers there, the S-shaped surface, the river of alchemical mercury. Stay with me. Where the alchemist saw the river of alchemical mercury is in the boundary between waking and sleeping. There is a place not quite sleeping and not quite awake, and there flows this river of alchemical mercury. Before going to bed, I say, Nikola Tesla and others are recorded as setting an alarm for 2 hours prior to waking up, and what they would like to do is wake up at 5 o'clock. If you was to get up at 7 a.m, they'd wake up intentionally at 5 a.m. You'd get up and probably maybe have a wee, not anything strenuous, just have a little light, and walk about, get yourself going, and then go back to bed and sleep, and then you slowly go back into REM, and past that, I forget all the technicalities, but because you've just woken from slumber, deep sleep, and then you go back to sleep after being awake a short time, you've awoken the certain parts of the brain, which allow for that transitional S-shaped liquid river of alchemical mercury for the men to go into. And Tesla was there quoting that some of his lucid dreaming and visions were obtained using that technique. If you are into experimentations with the men in that way, out of body experiences, lucid dreaming, remote viewing, transcendental mental hierarchy of, then this is the boundaries we're on about here as well. So it seems quite far-fetched. Or back in the day, they had this kind of knowledge of substances, elements, and the mind, the universe, and the comprising. So when you look back at the desert people and the towel heads that they brought us, not my words, I say it with love and respect, we are all one family, and we continue on. So you can project the contents of the unconscious and you can read it back to yourself, like when you go into a lucid dream, and one of them dreams where you know you're dreaming and you can talk to yourself in the dream, and it's very weird and layered, and you can control elements of the dream, and you have a consciousness within that dream, and you know it's weird, isn't it? It's more real than real in some way. So you can project the contents of the unconscious, and you can read it back to yourself. I'll give you that for an example. This kind of thinking is confounding to scientific thought, where the effort is always to fix everything into a given identity and a given set of regulated, controlled, expected behaviours, pigeonholing and boxing them. The other hermetic perception that is well illustrated by just thinking for a moment about Mercury is the notion, and this is central to all hermetical thinking, of the microcosm and the macrocosm, that somehow the great world, the whole of the cosmos, is reflected in the mystery of man, meaning men and women. It is reflected in the mystery of the human mind, the body interface, the shell, as Claudio likes to call it. Yes. So for an alchemist, it makes perfect sense to extrapolate from these internal, and what we call internal psychological processes to external processes in the world. All right, your duality there. That distinction does not exist for the alchemist, and I tell you, the longer that I delve and go into this, and the longer that I'm here, the more convinced that that may be the truth. Reality is but an illusion, albeit persistent. That's half finished, and we're going to finish that bit off with the help of these kind of works. The myth of our society then is an existential myth, that we are cast into matter, energy into matter, that we are lost in a universe that has no meaning for us, that we must make our meaning. And that is what Sartre and I've got here Kierkegaard and those people are saying, that we must make our meanings. It reaches our most absurd expression in such a statement that nature is mute. I mean, this is far from alchemical thinking as you could possibly get, because for the alchemist, nature was a great book, an open book that can be read. By putting nature through processes which revealed not only its inner mechanics, but the inner mechanics of the artifacts, the person working upon the material, in other words, the alchemist. In other contexts, we've talked about the importance of languages, and you know that this channel is all about the technology of language, the special purpose vehicle of language, and how our world is made. In the beginning, there was the word, let there be light. Phonetically, all civilizations, Aborigines sung into existence, African legends and other such legends, where the frequency, resonance, vibration. Part of the problem of the understanding of alchemy is the language is now slipping out of man's reach. We are so completely imbued with the Cartesian categories of the res verons, the word or the world thought, and the res extensive, the world of the dimensional space and causality and conservation of matter and energy, that in order to do more than carry out a kind of scholarship of alchemy, we now have to look at creating an alchemical language or field with alchemical language can then take place. An example would be Buddhism would not have been likely to have taken root in America were it not for the psychedelic phenomenon of the times. And that's not saying Buddhism is psychedelic. No, it isn't. Buddhism would have gotten not as far in America had psychedelics not created a context for Buddhist language to take root. Was it not understood that psychedelics, hallucinogenic mushrooms and such things, mind altering drugs, had prepared people for the notion that mind and the world can be poured together like mercury and sulphur, like the Sophic waters, to create a kind of new understanding? Otherwise, modernity has fixed our minds in the categories of Cartesian rationalism, and so I will not claim, and do not in fact think it is so, that there was anything overtly psychedelic in a sense of pharmacologically based about alchemy. When we look back through the alchemical literature, there is very little evidence that it was pharmacologically driven. Only when you get to the very last adumbrations of the alchemical impulse in someone like Paracelsus do you get the use of opium. It is interesting that a great deal of drugs of modern, societies were accidentally discovered by alchemists in their research. Distilled alcohol, number one, yeah, was a product of alchemical work. And as we've mentioned, opium was very heavily used by the Paracelsus schools. Okay, when what they possessed indeed was an ability to liquefy their mental categories and then to project the contents of the mind onto these processes and then have them read back. This is what made alchemists so fascinating to the Union schools, because the Unions were discovering the unconsciousness, and they realised before Jung's involvement with alchemy, the best material or psychotherapy to work upon was in fact dreams and mythology. And these were the two poles of the data field that the discovery of the unconscious was working on. Jung had the presence to realise that alchemy, which to that point had been dismissed as a naive effort to turn base metals into gold. This is the first fiction that you have to absolutely now purge from your minds. The only alchemists that ever tried to turn base metals into gold were indeed charlatans, the so-called puffers. They were called that not only for their exaggerated speeches, but for their use of bellows to drive the fires. Alchemy had always a core of true adepts and then a surround of misguided souls, a bit like the law research and many other areas, political, scientific, education, religious. Yeah, you've got outright con artists that are trying to change the base information, the base metals into gold. It's interesting that science in its naivety in the 20th century, this has actually been completed, hasn't it, scribes? The program of pseudo alchemy will say, if you have sufficiently powered nuclear reactors, you can change lead into gold. The cost is staggering. It has no economic importance whatsoever. It can be done by bombarding lead with sufficient amount of heavy particles. You can change it into gold. That's not what the original intent was, though, okay? We've got lost there when we're doing that. You shouldn't be there. Rewind selector. Sovereign David. Come on, Kez. In fact, when we look at the history of the 20th century science, we will now see it in a way that it's a misunderstanding of what the alchemical goals were to be one by one. It has done things that were, stated goals of the alchemist, except that the alchemist always spoke in similes and in a secret control language that was indeed symbolic. Another point that was brought up was the externalization of thy soul. Study and talk about the idea of redeeming the world through magic. And you may ask, how is this to be done, David? Well, the philosopher's stone, that is a complex of ideas that no matter how you divide it, no matter how you slice it, it is very difficult to hold the pith of essence of this concept. What it really comes down to is the idea that spirit is somehow resident in matter, consciousness and matter interlinked in a very diffuse form, and that the goal of Hermetic thinking and later alchemy is the concentration and redemption of this spirit, consciousness, energy, a focusing of it, a singularity point, a concentration, a meditative a bringing of it together, a fusion, if you wouldn't mind. This is an idea that was common in the Hellenistic world, not only to Hermetic thinking, but also to Gnosticism. Alias, Quinn, see you, Eric. Afternoon, Alan. What's happening? Word up, happy Sunday. What, Stephen? We're going to be back later with Kev, giving you a proofread of a document that's finally finished. It's 30 years in the making minimum, and it expands across the continuum of antiquities and pre-Christian. So I'm going to continue on. This was an idea that was common in the Hellenistic world, not only to Hermetic thinking, but also to Gnosticism. You've asked for this, so enjoy it, take it, and share it. Gnosticism is the idea that somehow the pure, holy, real light of being was scattered through a universe of darkness and saturnine power. That's Saturn and Ein, but Saturnine. Saturn and Nine, I hear, yes, make a note. Saturnine power. And the goal, Saturn the eater. Yes, you remembered that. Well done. Kudos. The eater of its children. Theatre. That's the other video. Moving on. See how I prep you for it? And the goal is by a process which we can call yogic or alchemical or meditating or moral or even ethical. The light must be gathered and concentrated within the body. Think of the Kundalini in India and how they express the yogic and energetic points, and then somehow released and redeemed. All esoteric traditions, East and West, talk about the creation of this body of light. We will not, in this publication, talk very much about alchemy, Northwestern alchemy, Taoism alchemy, and Vedic alchemy. In those systems, too, the notion is about the creation of this special purpose vehicle of light. SPV, that's right, again, there you go. I told you, when they emulate from original. This is one metaphor for the externalization of the stone. The Philosopher's Stone is another, and I will challenge you to try to imagine what the achievement of the Philosopher's Stone would be like. Okay? It is in trying to think that way that you then begin to dissolve the categories of the Cartesian trap. Imagine now for a moment, everyone, scribes, viewers, Sunday sessioners, that an object, a material, which can literally do anything. All right, so we got the Philosopher's Stone at the minute. Yeah, it's the space odyssey megalithic block that man's just discovered, that's been left as an artifact by ancient civilization on a faraway distant moon. So a material object that can do anything, the Philosopher's Stone. It can move across categorical boundaries with no difficulty whatsoever. Paradigms, categorical boundaries, physical boundaries. What do I mean? We mean that if you possess something like the Philosopher's Stone and you were hungry, you could eat it. If you needed to go somewhere, you could spread it out and sit on it and it would take you there. If you needed a piece of information, it would become the equivalent of a computer screen and it would tell you things, okay? If you needed a companion, it would talk to you. Hello, Surrey. If you needed to take a shower, you would hold it over your head and water would cascade down and pour out upon thee. It's an impossibility, I hear you say. That's right, it's a coincidentia repositorum. It is something which behaves like imagination and matter, without ever doing damage to the ontological status of one or the other. This sounds like, pure pathology in a context of modern thinking, doesn't it, everybody? We expect things to stay still and be what they are and undergo the growth and degradation that is inimical to them. The redemption of spirit and matter means the exteriorization of the human soul and the interiorization of the human body, so that it is an image freely commanded in the imagination. Imagination. I think this is the first time, don't go Willy Wonka on me now, don't go Gene Wilder in imagination. Gotta set you up now. Come with me. Imagination. I think this is the first time I've used this word in this publication. The imagination, though, is central to the alchemical opus opus 3, no, just opus. It is literally a process which goes on in the realm of the imagination, taken to be a physical dimension. Tesla backs quite a lot of this up, Isaac Newton and other such scholars. When I say this with the backing of many mans before that have brought the standing on the shoulders of giants. I think that we cannot understand the history that lies ahead of us unless we learn to think in terms of a journey into the imagination. Come with me. Da, da, da. We have exhausted the world of three-dimensional space. We are polluting it. We allegedly are overpopulating it. That's argumentatively an overestimated figure, but as a mainstream contemporary argument, we are allegedly overpopulating it. That's debatable. We are using it up with its resources and minerals. We had World Overshoot Day the other day that was only because of the current bankers crisis, pandemic, epidemic that's going off now, this weird time. That was World Overshoot Day was set back a bit, but we are busting this place up like there's no tomorrow. Somehow the redemption of the human enterprise lies in the dimension of the imagination. Someone's going to have to invent a way out of this, because if we continue on, it's going to end one way, and that one way or the other, they're going to get you. They're gonna get you. So, you know what I mean? Imagination needs to be used, and to do that, we have to transcend the categories that we inherit from 1,000 years of science and Christianity and rationalism that has had an heavy overtone of heresy and burning at the stakes and witches and how these king's colleges and royal colleges have suppressed this that we should have had from back in the day. We wouldn't be here now. The world would be better. We have to re-empower then and re-encounter the mind and the men. We're bringing that on this initiates of self. It's not that it's for us to give to you. You have to earn it. You have to put this in. You have to take from this. You have to use it. You have to transcend the categories that we inherit from this programming. Empower and encounter the mind and the ment, the consciousness. You can do this psychedelically if you so want, but get ready, it might be a world of pain. You can do it yogically. This is when we bring in all the family and the continents and the information, and you can do it alchemically and hermetically. There is present in the world at the moment, or at least we are seemingly looking at, it's likely, an impulse which is the named archaic revival. There is an archaic revival, the Akashic records, the halls of Amente. And what happens is that whenever a society really gets into trouble, and you can also use this in your own life as well, when you perhaps get into trouble, what you should do, or what the society normally does then is, what do you believe in the last sane moment that you experienced? Yes, what happened before, you got in trouble? When it was all normal, before it went crazy. Go back to that moment and then act forward from that, even if you no longer believe it. Now, in the Renaissance, this kind of looked like this is what's happened. The scholastic universe dissolved. New classes, new forms of wealth, new systems of navigation, new scientific tools made it possible to maintain the fiction of the medieval cosmology. There was a sense that the world was dissolving. Good alchemical world was dissolving. In that moment, the movers and shakers of those civilizations reached backwards into time to the last sane moment ever known. I've spelt that wrong, let me correct that. They had ever known, and they discovered that it was classical Greece, and they invented classicism in the 15th and 16th century, 1500, 1600. The texts which had lain in monasteries in Syria and Asia Minor, forgotten and untranslated for centuries, were then brought to the Florentine Council by people like Gymnastes, Platho and others, and translated. Then classicism was born. Its laws, its philosophy, its aesthetics, and we, man, now are the inheritors of that said tradition. It is now once again exhausted, and our cultural crisis right now today is greater, much greater. It's global, it's total. It involves every man, every woman, every child on this realm, every bug, bird and tree, to be quoting a famous man there. It is caught up in the cultural crisis that we have endangered. ideas are now exhausted, the ideas that we inherit out of Christianity and its half brother, may I say, science, or its bastard child, science. What we're suggesting is that an archaic revival now needs to take place. Imagination. It seems to be well in hand in the form of the revival of goddess worship, the high priestesses, the house of Gaga, and etc. out there, and shamanism. A partnership also, but notice that these things are old. How old? About 10,000 years or more. There was an unbroken thread, however thinly drawn, that persists from then right up to this moment, okay? And we found it. The idea of this publication is to show the way back to the magic of late paleo. What have I got here? Paleolithic, to show that there were intellectual traditions that were minority points of view that kept the faith and never allowed it to die. To my mind, this alchemical, Hermetic, Gnostic, Egyptian, Chaldean thread is the thread. If we unravel it with sufficient care and attention, then we can build a bridge from the air bridge, no, just a bridge, all right, from the otherwise nearly incomprehensible high magic of the late Paleolithic. I can't say it because of my tooth. Paleolithic. We can get near to it as ourselves as John Dee did, who died in 1604. John Dee. Who's he? John Dee. Ah, well, you'll come to find out very, very soon. We can discover that it's no further away from us than the beginning of the 30 Years' War. For my money, after that, it gets pretty mucked up. I mean, after Aeliophis Levy, it was already, waffling. I'm not very interested in the occultism of the 17th, 18th and 19th century. It's not necessary, because scholarship gives us the Chaldean oracles, the Trismegistic hymns, the library at Nag Hammadi, and so forth and so on, such things as. My impulse is to, in the most austere sense, reintroduce this kind of thinking so that you people, man, can actually start to live it out. Then step by step we can evolve our language and evolve our understanding to make our way back to the garden, back to Eden. It's occurred to us recently, It is said that Christ opened the doors to paradise. Indeed he did. It's there, you can find it. But what he did, he closed the doors to Eden though, alright? Eden. That in itself, let me put Eden there as well, because I need to expand on that in version 2, and where Eden is and where that Middle Eastern paradise is a very airy place, where everybody sits around on clouds strumming their lyres. I think what we want to do now is to try to make our way back to the alchemical garden. That's where our roots truly are. It began in the Hermetica. That's where meaning is. Meaning lies in the confrontation of contradiction. The coincidentia appositorium, that's what we really feel, not these rational schemers that are constantly beating us over the head with the thou shalts and the thou should, and rather a recovery of the real ambiguity of being itself, an ability to see ourselves as at once powerful and weak, noble and ignoble, future orientated and past facing. If you acknowledge the past in the future, then it allows if you're in the present and you acknowledge the past, then that only allows the future to continue. It's some kind of a weird loop that I'm getting brought back to me about the present influenced by the past, and only recognition and use of the past will then allow the present, because the future doesn't exist in the present, doesn't exist in the past, only the now is in the now time, the present, there can be no future without, and it goes into a nice loop of flux field non-locality. I didn't do that enough justice, but my head's in a different place. I tried my best. Those that know, you know where I am. So the ambiguity of being, an ability to see ourselves powerful and weak, and etc. So we need to become Janus or Janus faced. Janus, that's because of Yanker. Janus faced. Janus, come on, Anus. Janus faced, and to incorporate into ourselves the banished contradictions of being. Those, holy testament banished contradictions, man and the status of. They haunt the enterprises of science. We can leave that behind, and when we do, we will start to reclaim authentic being. And an authentic being, make no mistake about it, is what alchemical gold really is. All right, that's what they're talking about, authentic being. We found the golden nectar in the form of colloidal silver water, led to gold, and the third one being lit up would be golden, the golden lotus leaf activation of the pineal. Stay with me, all right? So right now we are led, Saturnine, if you like, and we'll talk about Saturn and Pluto and all of that. We will talk about the stages of the alchemical opus, and through these stages, and though there are many and multifarious, it all begins in what is called the Negredo, 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 the blackening, the depths of the leaden, saturnine, chaotic fixed place. The Negredo is something to do with black in itself, the black lands. You've got the Nubian Empire, the black pharaohs, the black lands, Chem, alchemy, from Chem, Alice from alchemy, from Chem, from black, from the lands that were rich and black, rich, fertile lands. When I say this, all right, Black Lives Matter, don't you know, all lives matter. Negredo, Negredo, Negro, all right. So you got the neg, and I was saying this to Kevin the other day. That came out to me just out the blue. It's mine. To Kevin, to you now in less than 24 hours. So the word makers and the ones that then appoint the Negro word to the black gentleman, sister, family, darker skinned family of darker skin, I say, not people of colour, not man of colour, darker skinned family will do. The Negro and the blackness connection there, the blackening the depths of the leaden, saturnine, chaotic, fixed place. Boom. I was like, So my own penny drop moment I'd like to share with you, for those that didn't get that bit when I said that. We go deep. She said she never had it so deep. Beanie Man, go away. It's deeper than deep. So I'm back on track. That's why we have been left. That's where we have been left by science and modernity, and such things as, and that's where the alchemist loves to begin. That's when he stokes, or she stokes, the furnace and begins the dissolution at coagulatio that leads to the dissolution at coagulatio that leads to the appearance of that philosopher's stone. I'll show you some books, and this is not exhaustive. The literature of Hermeticism and alchemy is vast and bulbous, okay? In the age of information, ignorance is but a choice. And I could have brought you a lot more books than this, but, you know, this is what it is. It doesn't mean what I show you is the best, and it simply tries to spread over a large area, okay? A novel that's been published by Lindsay Clark, and it's called The Chemical Wedding. It was about number 10 on the New York Times bestseller list. So back in the day, it's astonishing for such an obscure subject in itself. But there was obviously, you know, I'm sure Eric von Daniken must have thought that when his books went boom and all the languages, and he must have gone, with happiness and joy, joy, joy. It's a retelling of a famous incident, Lindsay Clark, all right, The Chemical Wedding, of a famous incident in alchemy of about the 19th century, when a woman named Mary Alice Atwood. Now what happens here is I had my inner self, higher self, go, whoop, whoop, whoop. And why did I have that happen? I went, what was her name? Alice, Mary, who the hell is Alice? Mary Alice Atwood. Does that name ring a bell to any of you? I'll give you a chance. This is the first, proofread of this interesting subject on alchemy and the Corpus Hermetica. Where have you heard Atwood before? Come on. I brought to you the Caesar's Messiah publications and the discovery of Josephus that was given by Santos. And when I went to look at Josephus, who did I find? I found the workings of a man called, come on, don't lose it, Dave. Where are we? Let me look at that. Mary Atwood. Joseph at will, Josephus, Caesar's Messiah, Joseph at will. Joseph, all right, who was married to Joseph? Mary. So we got Mary here, look, out of the workings of the, this is why we are the ones to do this job, because not everybody would pick up on the detail of this, and I'm like, maybe it's something, maybe it's not. So just go from the top. I found two researchers in these subjects of darkness. That one of them is called Joseph Atwill, and the other one is called Mary Alice Atwood. Moving on, who had very, very close relationship to her father, Dr. South. The two of them worked together, she on a text and he on a long poem. And to make a long story short, scribes, eventually they decided to destroy both poem and book, feeling that they had said too much and given the secret away. At least that's one version. This is a fictionalised retelling of that incident, intercut with a modern cast of characters, very clearly modelled on the poet Robert Graves. Robert Graves. I know, you couldn't make it up. Robert Graves. If you like to absorb your information in fictionalised forms, that is a wonderful book. John Borman, the movie director, auctioned a copy of that book. He was the guy that made The Emerald Forest and Excalibur, FYI. A number of compendiums of alchemical texts have been published over the centuries, and if you wish to study alchemy, you have to obtain some of these. If you're fortunate enough to read Francais, bonjour mon ami, très bien, you should read Prestige Ariane Bartholow. They collected alchemical text into encyclopedic sized volumes. Unfortunately, these have never been really translated into English, so if we have got Francais connection of hermetical, alchemical, and you can come back with, that would be muchas gracias, call going out. A.E. Waite, some of you may know for his role in the Golden Dawn. He collected, 40 thereabout alchemical texts, and all of the greats are there. Lull, Villanova, Michael Meyer, exactly. Where have you heard him before? Moving on. Basil Valentine, Kramer, Edward Kelly, to name a few. The place to begin, I think, is obviously with the question, who is Hermes Trismegistus? What are you talking about, Indy, David? I mean, this sounds incredibly exotic to some people. The Renaissance had the concept of what it called the presque te eloge. And if my Latin and Greek irritates you, I explained at the beginning why. Presque te eloge. If you have to understand you're dealing with a simple working class idiot here. I do mangle these things up. They were Orpheus, Moses, and primarily Hermes Trismegistus. Orpheus, not Morpheus, Orpheus, Moses, and Hermes Trismegistus, presque te eloge. Hermes Trismegistus was the primary source from the point of view of the Renaissance of this whole mystery tradition. That this is based on a misunderstanding. The Renaissance believed that Hermes Trismegistus was indeed older than Moses, Mosaic laws there. We now know, thanks to Isaac and Maurice Casaubon, I forget now how that's spelled, Casaubon or Casaubons, the two philologists of the early 17th century that definitely the Hermetic corpus was composed, I've done something wrong there, the Hermetic corpus was composed between the 1st and 2nd centuries after Christ, that definitively wrote that the Hermetic corpus was composed. The method of the Casaubon was to examine the philosophical language of the Corpus Hermeticum, and to show that there were words and phrases there that were post-Platonic and derivative from philosophers whose dates we have fully in hand. That's their argument, not mine. I can't say yay or nay. I'm working on that with you. If you go to an occult bookstore, if one was to go there, you will find that to this day this error persists. There are people who still claim that this stuff is possibly older than dynastic Egypt. I have said 3500 BC myself, so I have been included within that. I actually don't know. I'd like us to find out together, and with respect and intelligent argumentation. If you go to an occult bookstore, the error persists there, claim older than dynastic Egypt. There are even books available claiming how to teach you how to change lead into gold, okay? So that's just funny. What Hermes Trismegistus is a character, who appears in many guises in these Hermetic dialogues. The Hermetic hymns are usually couched in the form of dialogues between Hermes and his son Thoth. The Hermetic hymns are usually couched in the form of dialogues between Hermes and his son Thoth. I'll just put that there. I'm going to leave that there for you, alright? And we're going to come back to that. I've given it you. It's on this video. Thoth takes the role of the uninitiated ingenue or ingenue who is sitting at the feet of the master, and Thoth asks questions. What is the true nature of the world? What is the true nature of man? Hermes answers. The general form of these texts with exceptions, because there are 20 of them. There is an intellectual dialogue which builds to an ecstatic revelation. Then in the wake of the ecstatic revelation, there is a hymn of praise to Hermes Trismegistus. Trismegistus or Trismegistus, to say it properly, it's not guest, it is Trismegistus, means thrice blessed, alright? The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And it's sometimes, I'm not saying that is just triple, tri, we've gone from tri to mon, that's an equal concern to me, but it's, you know, and it's sometimes called Hermes triplex, triplex, triplex. To distinguish this Hermes from all other Hermes of early, middle and late Greek thinking, Hermes is of course the messenger god, the god of the scribes. Ding 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 ding. Brrr. I know. The reason this ibis-headed being, ibis, bird, ibis, holding a staff is embossed on the cover of so many books is because this is how Hermes Trismegistus, Thoth, Hermes, was imagined. He was associated with the scribe god of the Egyptian pantheon. The two distinguishing factors that stand out for us in our research that I think you need to incorporate into your thinking about Hermeticism are two very important conceptualizations. The first one sounds like the first is the divinity of human beings. I know about this word and how we break it down. This is how it's written here. We can extrapolate and recode the encodings at a later time. Let's get the basics over with before we start doing the ones that are advanced. Crack on. You hit me up in the emails and we will work on that as a unit on the .com. The first is the divinity of human beings, an extraordinarily radical idea in the context of late Hellenistic thinking. We all operate under the spell of the concept of the fall of man. Fact, it's true. And that man is an inferior being, as written in the testamentary story. Errors were made in the Garden of Eden, and that we are far from the nature of divinity. All magic in the West is derivative from this tradition. It takes the position that man is a divine being, men and women are divine beings. The Corpus Hermeticum actually refers to man as God's brother. This is a double-edged perception. Why? Because it gives tremendous dignity to the human enterprise. It also raises the possibility of the error of pride and hubris. Hubris, I know, I don't often say that word. Hubris. In the Renaissance, Marcello Facino. Scapari, Marcino Facino. No, Marcello Facino boiled this notion down to the aphorism, man is the measure of all things. You may notice that this is the position really of science, that man is the measure of all things. That is up to us. We can decide the course of the cosmos. All magic stems from this position. Therefore, the church was so concerned to stamp out magic, he's going to step on you again. He's going to step on you, the Vicar of Christ and his Catholic club. Yes, don't you know? He's going to take away your desire. He's going to stamp out your fire. Don't you know? You're the man. You're the man. You're the man. Bow, bow, bow. I need some guitar funkiness in the studio today. So therefore the church was so concerned to stamp out the magic, to step on, because it assigns man an importance that the church would rather reserve to a deity. Hello there, would you like to speak to the creator? There's a queue this way, you get access through me, take the queue and I will listen and consider your plight, my child. God bless you. Um, an entirely different conception of what human beings are, and when we get into the text, I'm going to read you furthermore some of those beautiful passages. Don't you worry, Marlene Massan. The second distinguishing factor, and notice that this position on man empowers tremendous freedom. Man is the measure of all things. This second distinguishing factor in Hermeticism is the belief that we can control fate, that we may be looking like to be able to escape from the cosmic fate. The late Hellenistic mindset was, and what you get in the Gnostics is the belief that because of astrology, because of the stars, we are subject to control from these exterior forces. In most Gnostic thinking, the whole concern is to somehow evade what is called the hymn harmony. The hymn harmony, that's right, the cosmic fate, the cosmic serpentine, the procession of the equinox, living, breathing clockwork of the as above, so below. The Jordan Maxwell, the kingdom of animals is above in the form of the zodiac. So in most Gnostic thinking, the whole concern is to somehow evade what is called the hymn harmony or the cosmic fate. Evading the cosmic fate. What? No way. Well, here we go. In the Gnostic systems, the only way that that seemingly can be done is by ascension through the shells of cosmic ordering forces. What are they? Who are they? Exactly. Accrington Stanley. No, the archons, the planets, the planetary demons, so forth and such things as. Okay? Who lives in a universe like this? I don't know, Dave, but David, it's over. Shut up. I'm getting on with it. You burst through. You transcend fate, all right? What the Hermetic thought is, I love this stuff. It really is exciting. Is that these faiths become personified. Person if I-E-D. As the decons, as stellar demons. And then it is held that there is magic, okay? A magical system which is possible. When we say magic, we mean quantum. But these words I will not change for the originality, but they will be changed in version 2s, and you will see the difference. And I've got lots of pictures to go with this. A magical system which is possible where you can call these archangels to your side. Remember my writings of when you are brave, amazing forces come to your side and protect you. I've written that in comments and I've published that. So this is now supplementary to building upon when you are brave, a magical system, you know, which is possible, the connection, the vibration, the hiring of, the acceptance and belief and faith. Yes, we got faith, we don't need Bibles, don't take the Michael, hear my recital, I hold the title, it's quite vital, we get high. On the opposite of Nital is the words I said in the other video about the magical system, where you call the archangels to your side and work with them and not subject to the inevitable working of the cosmic machinery. Okay, that doesn't mean to say you can go out and breach common law, but what happens is coincidences, good luck, fortune, happiness, enlightenment, things landing in your lap, things seeming to go too good to be true, amazing synchronicities. So I'll start that bit again because it's really big and it's only a few sentences. So in the Gnostic system, the only way it can be done is by ascending through the shells of the cosmic ordering immutable forces. The archons, remember the ascension of what I brought you in that one as well, and the archons, the planets, the planetary demons and such things as. Then beyond the hymn harmony, which is actually thought of as place in space, you will burst through and you will transcend your fate in a way, which is how we say we control the, you know, what the Hermetic thought is that these faiths then become personified, not happy about that word, as the decons, as stellar demons, and it is then held that there is a magic a magical system which is possible, where you can call to the forces, energies, we say archangels, for want of cognitive grapplage with, and you call them to your side and you work with them. The power of intent, the law of attraction, what they've hidden in the power of prayer, it's very relevant, it's not hokum, and I'd like you to comment and get back to me. So you effectively are not subject to the inevitable working of the cosmic machinery, and you burst through like a revelation over the late Hellenistic world, because there was such philosophical and emotional and political exhaustion, that this is a counterpoise to the message of the New Testament, you see, which contains a similar message. And you know that you can be saved in the body, you can escape the inevitable dissolution and degradation laid upon us by time. There are two distinguishing factors: the divinity of man and the possibility of using magic to evade the machinery of fate. I want to read some of the Corpus Hermeticum to you to give you the flavour of that, as we're making this recipe for this fabulous meal, this Hermeticum Corpus prophetic dissonance cake of, this week I've mostly been merging the Corpus Hermeticum with a bit of Christianity. Before I do, I want to say something about the history of these texts you may or may not be familiar with. And there is an Apuleius in the Golden Mass, Apuleius, the Golden Mass, which is a novel of initiation that is late Roman. Apuleius is also put together what is called the Asclepius. The Asclepius, I believe I've got this PDF as well, is a true Hermetic literature. I believe I've read it, and I may already have uploaded it. If not, I will double check that. It's a true Hermetic literature that was not lost. It was the only one that was available through the Dark and the Middle Ages. All the rest were lying untranslated in Syrian monasteries. Syria, hasn't that just had a big load of wars and bombings, and a bit like the Middle East and Iraq? And funny that, isn't it? It's not just all about central banks. All the rest were lying untranslated in Syrian monasteries until Gemistus Pletho in 1490 brought these manuscripts to Florence, to the court as Davinci, or De Medici. De Medici, I said De Medici, and the translation project then began. Now, the only other Hermetic material that was accessible through the High Gothic period was a book called Picatrix. Okay, I didn't say Pikachu, I said Picatrix. The Picatrix was probably most likely seemingly written in the 1200s, although this elicits screams of dissent from the burning-eyed factions. Reason dictates that we consider the Picatrix 12th century, so only the Asclepius and the Picatrix represented this strain of thought before the 1460s. The importance of Hermetic thinking can be seen by the fact Gemistus Pletho brought Plato to the Florence Council, as well as Hermes Trismegistus, and when Marcello Facino sat down to do this translation work, Cosmo de Medici said, Plato can wait. I'm getting old. Do the Hermetica Corpus, or the Corpus Hermetica first. That's much more important. We will sort out Plato business in a few years. It was done and completed in 1493, and in 1494 Cosmo died. He never saw the translations of Plato, but felt that the Corpus Hermeticum was more important. I mentioned this to show you the importance that was attached to this material over others. Here is one of the key passages on man's nature. This is from Book 1 of the Corpus Hermeticum. But mind, the father of all, he who is life and light, gave birth to man, a being like to himself, and he took delight in man as being his own offspring. For man was very good, or goodly to look on, bearing the likeness of his father. With good reason then did God take delight in man, for it was God's own form that God took delight in. And men and God delivered over to man all things that had been made. This is the basis of the Fascinian statement, man is the measure of all things. And man took station in the Maker's fear, and observed the things made by his brother, who was set over the region of fire, and having observed the Maker's creation in a region of fire, he willed to make things for his own part also, and his father gave permission, having in himself all the working of the administrators. There is a reference to the angel hierarchy here. And the administrators took delight in him, and each of them gave him a share of his own nature. So man is the brother of God and a creature at home with the angels. What? So man is the brother of God and a creature at home with the angels? This idea is echoed in the Asclepius, which you will recall was available throughout the Middle Ages. The range of man is yet wider than that of demons, meaning the angels. This term is, transposable in its hermetic thought. The individuals of the humankind are diverse and are many characters. They, like the demons, come from above and entering into fellowship, all right, with other individuals. We don't like fellowship. There's a good reason why. They make for themselves many and intimate connections with almost all other kinds. The famous passage, "Man is a marvel," then Asclepius, honour and reverence to such a being. Man takes on him the attributes of a god, as though he were himself a god. And he is familiar with the demon kind, for he comes to know that he is sprung from the same source as they, and strong in the assurance of that in him which is divine. He scorns the merely human part of his own nature. How far more happily blended are the properties of man than those of other beings. He is linked to the gods, inasmuch as there is in him a divinity akin to theirs. He scorns that part of his own being which makes him a thing of earth, and all else which he finds himself connected by heaven's ordering. He binds or bonds to himself by that tie of his affection. So when I say I'm bonded and there are only certain things that bonds man, I fully understand where man is bonded and what be bonding man. My lordships, and to the London Temple, BAR, son behind bars temple of such institutional abominations to divine natural positive laws there. This is an incredible radical conception of what it means to be man, so radical that it is unwelcome even in the present context. Notice the modern feeling of this. I mean, this is not biblical rhetoric. This is philosophical discourse as we know it and carry it out ourselves. This is the passage on the adept and the initiation. Thoth speaks to Pimandres. This is in book 1. But tell me this too, said I. God said, let the man who is mind in him recognize himself. But have not all men mind? And then Pimandres replies, old man said mind to me, speak not so. I even mind come to those men who are holy and good and pure and merciful, and my coming is succour to them, and my coming is a succour to them, and forthwith they recognize all things, and win the Father's grace by loving worship and give thanks to him, praising and hymning him with hearts uplifted to him in filial affection. Again, the reference to being God's brother, brosifs, in filial affection, and easy for me to say. And before they give up the body to the death which is proper to it, they loathe the body senses, knowing what manner of work the senses do. Now this introduces the theme of asceticism, that, like the Gnostics in much of the Hermetic literature, a kind of horror of the earth, a desire to ascend and get away from. Scott makes the distinction between what he calls pessimistic gnosis and optimistic gnosis, and within the 20 text of the Corpus Hermeticum you get vacillation on this point. in some cases of the Mandaean, the Sabian tendency is there, and the world soul is invoked. The whole of creation is seen as a living being, ment and mind involved in this soteriological process, this process of salvational mechanics through magic. Okay, in other texts of this Gnostic horror of matter, it is very strongly stressed. It is very clear that the Hellenistic mind was ambivalent on this point. Even as we are ambivalent on this point, I mean, it's a real question. Are we here to be caretakers of the earth, or are we strangers of the universe? In the universe. Wait there, I need to go somewhere a minute. Let's have a break, a pause. I will be back with you. It's regarding food, and it is important. Ah, here we go. We are back. Or are we strangers in the universe? And these is our task. And this is our task, to return to a forgotten and hidden home, no trace of which can be found in the saturnine world of matter. It's very hard to have it both ways. Jerry came on, alias, Lisa, I just want to say G-Star. Happy Sunday. What's going on? I'll look at this later. Hello to the 18. Thank you to the 13 thumbs up. I see a new scribe there. Osman, Ertan, Bosh, to you all. You're going to have to sort of take a position, I'm afraid, my scribes, on this information and how you see things and position yourself. These previous families, clansmans of ours, were forced into the same dilemma. There's no middle ground between these two positions. And so that dichotomy, that conundrum, haunted a lot of Hermetic thinking. Here is the Hermetic creation myth. This is book 3, paragraphs 1 through quite a few. And you will see the comparison with the similarities to the Christian creation myth now, everybody. Alright, so without further ado, it may have extraordinary differences, you may note. So there was a darkness in the deep water without form, and there was a subtle breath, intelligent, which permeated the things in Chios with divine power. Then, when always yet undistinguished and unwrought, there was shed forth holy light, and the elements came into being. All things were divided one from another, and the lighter things were parted off on high, the fire being suspended aloft, so it rose up unto the air, and the heavier things were sent down, and sand was deposited beneath the watery substance, I wrote with, and the dry land was separated out from the watery substance and became solid, and the fiery substance was articulated with the gods therein, and heaven appeared with its 7 spheres. What? 7? Boom, I like that bit. And the gods visible in starry forms, with all their constellations. And heaven revolved and began to run its circling course. The cherubims and the particle matrix, the angelic particle matrix, as you've come to learn, riding upon divine air, and each god by his several power set forth that which he was bidden to put forth. And there came 4-footed beasts, and creeping things, and fishes, and winged birds, and grass, and every flowering herb, all having seed in them according to their diverse natures. For they generated with themselves the seed by which their races should be renewed. Then it goes on to describe the birth of man. I'll leave that for you to discover, and we'll stop there. Now this thinking is what alchemy seized upon in its ambitions. In a way, one way of thinking about alchemy came to attempt is the thinking. It went like this. Since man is God's brother, the purpose of man is to intercede in time. It was believed that ores, precious metals, and things like this grew within the earth. It was a thoroughgoing theory of evolution that reached right down into the organic realm. It was thought that gold deposits in the earth would replenish themselves over time. It's passages like this that gave permission for that kind of thinking. In line with that, we are now in book 4, and remember the tone changes slightly from book to book. They were, after all, written about 300-year period by various people. You must understand then that God is pre-existent and ever-existent, and that he alone made all things and created by his will the things that are. And when the Creator had made the ordered universe, he will set into order the earth also. He willed to set into order the earth, and so he sent down man, a mortal creature made in the image of an immortal being, to be an embellishment of the divine body, for it is man's function. Here it comes, the purpose of man, according to Book 4. For it is man's function to contemplate the works of God, and for this purpose he was made, that he might view the universe with wondering awe and come to know its maker. Brother, father. I know that's a bit weird to go from brother to father, but that's the transition and the alchemical thought pathway we need to at least stand before and consider. Man has this advantage over all living beings. He possesses mind and speech. Now speech, my son, got imparted to all men, but mind he did not impart mind to all. Not that he begrudged it to any. Oh, no, no, no. The grudging temper does not start from heaven above, but comes from being down below here, in the souls of those men who are devoid of mind. We call them psychopaths. We've covered this in previous recent videos and publications to come. This introduces the concept of an elect, or a perfectly, a hierarchy of human accomplishment and understanding. And this is also basic to T Gnosticism. It's not for everyone. They're saying it's for the pure of heart. And then what pure of heart means depends on the school that you are looking at. For some it was mathematical accomplishments. For others it was contact with the Logos. For others it was an ability to resist the temptations of the senses. But there was always this sense of the higher and lower possibility within the human experience. And no? Everybody with me so far? Are you keeping up? I've got 20 watching and 15 thumbs up, so we'll say kaboosh. My initiate scribes, it's something different, something for your bank holiday, something to ease you into the cognitive thought pathways of laws and the other areas that we step out of when we're not battling the crown organisations and big Barry Barracudas and writing certain legislative lawful rebuttals and conditional acceptances and etc. This is my fun area. This is the area where I just I like to immerse myself in the thought potentiality consciousness and go for a swim within that Mercury river between the two realms. This is the attempt. This is at the opening of book 12, and this is a book with a heavy Mandaean sensitivity, the sensitivity to life. Now this whole cosmos, and notice how this transcends even the Buddhist point of view, because in Buddhism I find they say plants have no soul. This is a tremendous possible failure in the Buddhist conception as far as I, David, and a few others may be concerned. Now this, which is a great God and an image of him who is greater and is united with him and maintains its order in accordance with that will, is one mass of life. And there is not anything in the cosmos, nor has been through all time, from the first foundation of the universe, neither in the whole nor among the several things contained in it, that is not alive. There is not, and has never been, never will be in the cosmos anything that is dead. For it was the Father's will that the cosmos, as long as it exists, should be living, a living being, and therefore it must need God also. It must needs be God also. How then, my son, could there be dead things in which that is a God? and that which is an image of the Father, in that which is one mass of life. Deathness is a corruption, and corruption is destruction. How then can any part of that which is incorruptible be corrupted, or any part of that which is a god then be destroyed? There are other passages. This is Book 18. For as the sun, who nurtures all vegetation, also gathers the fruits of the produce with his rays, as it were with my mighty hands, plucking the sweetest odours of the plants, even so we too, having received into our souls, which are the plants of heavenly origin, the efflux of God's wisdom, must in return use his service for all that springs up in us. Now this conception that the human soul is a plant is a unique idea. I do not know of another tradition. Johannes Wilbert talked about how among the Amazon Indians and the Waru, the man actually marries trees. What? Man actually marries trees. They actually take trees as their wives. Yes, that's right. They take trees as their wives. A tree, and it's a man's job throughout his entire life to take care of this tree with the same tenderness and attention that he lavishes on a living wife. This is more radical conception than this conception that most important part of us could be a plant. It reminds me of the notion that animals are something invented by plants to carry them from place to place. This sensitivity to the vegetative nature of the world is so great that it raises the plant to be the pith essence, the soul of man and the brother of God. You see, the valuation of the vegetative universe here is of an extremely radical type. So when others go on about meat and dead energies and eating the bum holes of, when Santos and others have gone preaching, and they say back in the day that the ones that were in the scholarly ways and were studiers of and in the schools of generally were herbalists and vegetarians. There's a reasons of you know, upper echelon and sections of humanity that were given the mind. Was mind predetermined at birth, or does someone have to develop a mind? And mind doesn't look like it's predetermined, looks like it's acquired through cultivation of a relationship in the Hermetic language, the nous, the higher mind. In the Gnostic language, logos is the informing spirit. Nothing is predetermined in the Hermetical system, because through magic we can allegedly, seemingly overcome the energies of cosmic fate, the quantum double split observation experiments by in the late middle 1600s by somebody Smith, was it, explains that. This is the great good news of Hermeticism, that we are not subject to fate. We should probably talk a little about this logos concept. This is something which seems very alien to modern people, unless they are psychedelically sophisticated. The logos of the Hellenistic region, and what it was, an informing voice that spoke in your head or in your heart, wherever you want to put it, and it told you the right way to live. You get this idea even in the later Old Testament, where it said that the truth of the heart, it can be known. But I missed out it. There is no great dilemma to know good from evil. You simply inquire of your heart. Is it good or is it evil? Which will tend you? And all of the great thinkers of this Greco-Hellenistic period sought and cultivated the logos. Plato even had his demon. Everyone sought the informing voice of the nous. Remember the nun? And in the beginning there was the noon, the nun, the nous. Yes, that's what it's called in Neoplatonism and in Hermeticism. And then in Gnosticism, the logo. So I appreciate I haven't mentioned all of these before, but there are works and studies, and it isn't necessary, but now is the time into level 2 of the Sovereign Masters Guild and into many areas. The quantum, when I say the quantum, that's why I got excited about the quantum language and the importance possibly, and the nullification of contract and the protection in the public commercial realms that could potentially offer, and other quantum type, so that's why you now are beginning to see It's in practical to bring it out at the beginning because there is a curve, and I want to tell you back then, but I don't tell you to now. And hopefully there are a lot of penny dropping moments and a lot of the areas of the gaps of, it's still got massive a way to go, and you will see that over the course and towards the end of this 2020, the 21st of the 12th 2020 is going to be a fine day, let me tell you. Somehow it's possible for an informing voice to come into cognition that knows more than ye do. It's a connection with the collective or the collective unconscious, I suppose. We've called it the collective quantum consciousness archives, to be precise, aka the halls of Amente, aka the Akashic records, aka a long old list there. That is convivial, controversial, and just talks to you about the nature of being in the world and the nature of your being in the world. It's puzzling to us because it seems so remote. I mean, for us, a voice in our head or the heart is pathology. And you may know the famous story in the 1st century of some fishermen off the shore of the island of Argos in the Mediterranean Sea. They heard a great voice from the sky, and the voice said, "Great Pan is dead. Great Pan is dead." While people like Lactanius and Eusebius, these patristic fathers, the people who built Christianities, who took the Gospels and turned it into a world religion, they took this annunciation from the sky of the death of Pan as the annunciation of the change of the eon. In other words, by the eon, I mean those 2,000 yearly, 2,000 periods that are associated with the equinoctial precession. Each eon is roughly 2,000 and so many years in between Aquarius, Pisces, and as it goes round, you've got that parameter of creating that 26,000 years in completion of a cycle, whilst the sun is travelling round the universe, galaxy, and taking the solar system with it. And we are doing all of these movements as well, allegedly. The helical rising of the solstitial sun, it's my tooth, sorry, slips slowly from one house to another. And around AD 100, I mean, there's argument because these things are never precise, but around AD 100, the age of Pisces began. Okay, the previous eon ceased. The cosmic machinery, the great gears of the largest scale of the cosmic machinery, clicked past a certain point and into the age of Pisces, which we would refer to, again, Jesus, the fish, Bronze Age Palestine, Hitchens, I'm getting him in, Hitchens is some words, version 2 is going to be incredible, but you've got the fish, 2,000 years ago, Bronze Age Palestine, Pisces, clicking into place with the cosmic clock of the animals above. This was then taken as very fortuitous for Christianity because, as you've learned, Christ was associated with the sign of the fish, Dagons, fish heads, something smelly about this lot in itself, and was seen as a Piscean movement then, okay? This is where the Hermetica is merging in with the Christianity. You're in the S shape of the yin and the yang. Enjoy the swim through this, sea of of mind and mental alchemy is going off right now. I believe that it's entirely possible that the Logos at that moment, that rough moment in time fell seemingly silent, and that it's been silent for around about 2,000 years. And we've had a little bit of a perversion and arrested development occur. What we have then is the exegesis of text, and noetic archaeology of the sort we are carrying on here. Now a phenomenon as trivial as channeling can be seen as the reawakening of the Logos. The long night of Piscean silence is ending as we come into Aquarius, the picture, the data, the pouring, the download. And the spirit of the nous is again moving in the world, speaking in the minds of the adepts and the hierophants, who have the techniques and the will to connect, the free will to connect with this stuff, the fifth dimension, 5D. Here we come. Obviously, this kind of literature can be seen as the last message from the fading of the Logos. the last statements before the change of the eon, and rendered this control language, it is a language in itself, difficult and non-intuitive and somewhat then incomprehensible, scattered and fragmented. We get the aggregates of the realm and we bring that back into play. The word mind and ment, quested, in this context, Scott's translation of this word nous simply means the universal permeating intelligence, okay? They lived a life of purity, although their definitions of purity greatly widely varied. Man is, in my opinion, this channel's opinion, in the scholars' opinion, the self-scholars, the non-academic, no Harvard, MIT, Oxford, and blah, 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 you won't get this there, but man is a brother of God, and still you have to earn that. All right, you are, but you're not. It's to be claimed. Titles claiming of sovereignty. Okay, so it makes a kind of denial that where you can look at Thomas Hobbes in Leviathan. Thomas Hobbes, was a great theoretician of great modern government and social organisations. He says in the Leviathan, man to man is like unto an errant beast, and man to man is like unto a god. It's absolutely true, our noblest aspirations and our most hideously dehumanizing activities take place in the context of our relationship to one another, okay? Your community, the way that you act, your courtesy, your core belief system. This is what the alchemists were trying to do, you see. They were trying to separate the gold from the dross, the weed from the chaff. They were trying to take the errant beasts away from, when we look at alchemical art, what do we see? We will see dogs, pigs, and dragons. We will see the errant beast, and we will see the angelic beings also alike that are trying to be separated out of that nature. This is within each and every one of us. Man to man is like unto a god, and man to man is like unto an errant beast. Question: to do with mind, according to our understanding in Neoplatic traditions and the divided line of Plato, the reference here is to Neoplatonism, which is a kind of parallel tradition to what we're talking about. Plato had at least a couple of phases in the evolution of his thinking, it seems. We can find the young Plato as a rational thinker, but the later Plato, apparently after he fell under the influence of the Pythagorean schools, he becomes a full-blown mystic. And then in the late Roman Empire, this is almost 1,000 years after Plato, we have to remember, in our minds, all these people get squeezed together like they could have dinner together in one time, in one night, but they are Plotinus is far from Plato as we are from King Canute. You have to bear in mind this scale, the continuum of the history itself. 900 to 1,000 years after Plato, Byzantine schools of philosophy arose around Porphyry, Plotinus and Proclus as the major exponents, and they worked with the late Plato and elaborated a beautiful mystical cosmology. Many of those ideas in terms of parallel conceptuality, the stuff in the Corpus Hermeticum, and if you're of a certain intellectual type, you may find yourself more comfortable with the Neoplatonists in the Corpus Hermeticum. You may find yourself more comfortable with the Neoplatonists than this at all. This material tends to be emotional, evocative, poetic, and while there is great poetry in Plotinus, there is also very tight thinking that goes along with it. There's not much room for manoeuvre. There are other traditions. We're kind of making it simple here. There is a whole tradition of what was called the Chaldean oracles. I've mentioned the Chaldean, the Chaldean before. Mesopotamia, Akkad, King Nebuchadnezzar, the Hammurabi, and so forth, and the studies of Daniel's and previous works and Babylon, and working up from 6000 BC Zoroaster and the continuum along there. It's messy. It's not all for one video. So there was a whole tradition of what was called the Chaldean oracles, the seers, where certain things, the story of what was that one now with the Egyptian and the magic there, and certain things. It's fragmented. It's very interesting. There's at least a collection of at least 100 or more fragments we find there, all of which have the great commentary of Eusebius in 30 volumes. That's all lost, and we don't have that material. Much like the Library of Alexandria, you know, it's in a way the most mysterious of these traditions because they didn't survive. It may be that the Chaldean oracles is the missing link to push this stuff back several centuries deeper into time, because the Chaldean oracles may actually be pre-Platonic. There's considerable evidence of that. There are very arcane matters. I mean, you have to give yourself over a lifetime of learning, to be fair, these languages and philology of these languages just to scratch the surface and to start to penetrate this stuff. You won't pick it up overnight, and you can't copy it and inherit it. The Hermetic corpus was largely Alexandrian. There was also Christian Platonists in Alexandria. Remember what I said about Greece and the mixture of the scholars and the Muslims and the Egyptians and the Christians and the Persians, all as one. There were certain centres in Rome, Byzantium, Alexandria, Heliopolis in Egypt. It was a cult site that was maintained for a very long time. If you're interested in this stuff but you don't like to absorb it this way, neither do I, not many do. It is hard work. You've got a man called Flaubert, of all people, the Flaubert of Madame Bovary, wrote an incredible novel. Did he? He did indeed. Do you want it? I'll give it you for free, called The Temptation of Saint Anthony. All right, in which he describes the 2nd century Alexandria in a fictionalized form. It gives you a real flavour for this recipe, you know, that we're making here today, for the intellectual complexity of the Alexandrian world. Christianity had not yet gelled; it was many things still. All right, you not only have the Gnostics of 5 or 6 schools, Simonists, Valentinians, Basaldians. You also have Christians, a number of calling themselves Christians. There were also in furious competition the Docetists, the Montanists, and later Nestorians. There were gymnosophists from India, people who are actually carrying yogic doctrines into the Mediterranean world right then. You can have all the surviving cults of the old Egyptian strata, the cults of Isis and Cybele and Adonis and Dionysus. There we go, and it goes on and on. I mean, the richness of this intellectual world is disgusting. There's nothing incomparable in our experience. It shows the passion with which people were trying to understand the dilemma of a dying world, because this is what they were indeed confronted with. The intellectuals of the empire, they could feel it all slipping through their hands, and Flaubert gives a wonderful picture of this. Flaubert has a very romantic streak. It's like smoking some Stardog hashish reading this book, some of these publications in particular. The attention to the fabric and the architecture, the food and the odour. And the subject matter is the temptation of Saint Anthony, and it is a perfect excuse, a brilliant segue to describe these temptations in all their sensual richnesses and erotic kinkiness. It is a wonderful way to absorb this material. Sorry about that. The only people who had access to this information were the rich, fortunate and literate. What survives from a civilization is its literatures, and these literatures are usually the production of an elite establishment and or institutions indicative of that time. We have to remember, don't have any illusions about the Roman Empire. I mean, I always think of the wonderful description Boris Pasternak in Dr. Zhivago goes off on about ancient Rome. He describes it as a bargain basement. Remember what I said about the basement and the tirages of on a previous video, on 3 floors. This was an empire that lived by human cruelty as its way of measure. It was on the backs of slaves that this airy intellectual speculation was based. It's a tremendously pluralistic society. That pluralism was maintained by standing armies of enormous size and policies of occupation of enormous cruelty. our relationship to the Christian tradition. We are aware of such things in the Zealot revolt of 69 and the reign of Herod Antiochus in Jerusalem, Bronze Age Palestine, etc. That was just one little corner of the empire in Armenia, in Gaul, in Spain, in North Africa. Military governors were carrying out outrageous suppressions of native populations. What? I know, it's there. It was not a pretty time to be alive, and what comes down to us then is the yearning to escape from that. No wonder these people saw the earth as a cesspool and a trap, because that is what it was for them, without a shadow of a doubt, without any iota there. Our own age is very similar right now. We do not have slavery as that, but we have monetary mechanics, debt slavery, the triangle, the trust, the settlor, beneficiary, principal, legal possessory title, assumed, presumed, non-disclosure, subjugation, subrogation, subversion, supposition. Wow. So we do not have slavery as in whipping of the and Mr. Jones's plantation, but we do suffer under propaganda, mass manipulation of ideas, the degradation and exploitation of the third world on a scale that the Roman Empire could not even dream of, such grandiose. There is a great affinity. If any of you are interested in this kind of thing, then we highly recommend the book by Hans Jonas entitled The Phenomenon of Life. Hans Jonas entitled The Funk Phenomenon of Life. It's a book of it's a book of philosophical essays. There is one essay in there called Gnosticism and the Modern Temper, in which he shows that once you take Gnosticism and dump the angels and the star demons and all the colourful bric-a-brac of late Roman thinking, what you have is a thoroughgoing existentialism, completely compatible with Jean-Paul Sartre and the kind of intellectual despair that characterised the post-World War II generation in Europe. Heidegger is a thoroughgoing Gnostic in his intentionality. It's just that the language is modern and stripped of its magical thinking. By being stripped, magical thinking in a way, modern resignation of that state of mind is even more hopeless and disempowering. Fortunately, I think we're moving out of those shadows. In fact, we can see that we are. I'm 42 years old and I've kind of grown up on reading weird things and such sciences as psychedelics is an interesting area that seems to broke over the intellectual world like a tidal wave of a revelation. We've quoted Jean-Paul Sartre's statement that nature is mute. Now I see that this is an obscenity, almost. An intellectual crime against reason and intuition, antithesis of the logos. Much of our world is ruled by men older than we are, who are fully connected into that without any question. They just think all the rest of this is namby-pamby, ecological soft-heartedness of some sort. There is no openness to the power of the bios, to the fact of a living, breathing, intelligent cosmos, everything connected. That is what Rupert Sheldrake is always trying to say. The reinvestiture of spirit into matter, consciousness and matter. The rebirth of the world soul is a necessary concomitant to what we now understand about the real nature of the world. In the way of the theory of evolution, the theory of evolution was born in the 1850s. It is the beginning of the turning of the tide, because even through the first 100 years of evolutionary theory, that was fantastically concerned to eliminate teleology, eliminate purpose. Nevertheless, nobody ever understood that except the hardcore evolutionist. To everybody else, evolution ascent to higher form. I once heard somebody say, if it does not have to do with genes, it is not evolution. Well, that's a tremendously limited view of what evolution is. I mean, the inorganic world is evolving, the organic world is evolving. There the currency is genes. Also, the social and intellectual world of human beings is now evolving, and there the currency is not genes, but means. So that idea carries with it the implication of an ascent to a higher form, and correctly broadened and understood becomes permission for a return to optimism and to the kind of hope that these clansmen were trying to articulate. It's a separation it's a separation necessary for philosophical disclosure and discourse. That is why philosophical discourse is not top of the list right now. The language itself is in the process of making distinctions that are false, as you've come to learn. Therefore, all language would be a lie. Therefore, the ultimate truth lies in something that is then unspeakable. I'm afraid the language of silence, we present that to the ascent to the unspeakable is through this kind of philosophical analysis. Language can be viewed as a special purpose vehicle. Eventually there's no road, it's going to dry up, all right? You're going to have to park up your transportation vehicle, pleasure craft, get out and then go the rest of the journey on foot. There is no road. You're going to walk. And I think that this is the journey. Plotinus, the great Neoplatonist, has this wonderful phrase. He calls the mystical experience the flight of the alone into the alone. Now, this is a lovely image. It is so uncompromising. It is about as true as something can be and still move in the realm of this present language. It is saying, finally words fall away, and finally there is only that which cannot be said. I quote this column by this obscure poet who died in the trenches of France in the First World War. He's called Trumbull Stickney. He wrote a poem called Meaning's Edge. The punchline goes a little something like this. I look over Meaning's Edge and I feel the dizziness of the things you have not said. I think on that in one of SPO's publications. This is the effort, that you put in each and every time to carry you to the edge of an abyss, and then we push you over into the dizziness of the things that are unsaid. That's our job, foundation educational trust, all right? And the unspeakable, it comes a lot from the Egyptian side of things and the dead and the book of the dead and the languages and the dark side, but the unspeakable philosophy operates in the realm of the speak-able. Eventually we must confront that which cannot be said, all right? If you've been on a DMT trip, you sometimes see things which you cannot there are no words. Enough said. The dizziness of things unsaid. I know a few of you have been there, so that is where authenticity then flows back into the world of community and speech. It comes from a place of utter silence and unsayability. What you say, I say what I like and I like what I say, but sometimes there is an unsayability. How could it be otherwise? I mean, what hubris it would be to expect that the small mouth noises of a little English man could encompass the being. I mean that it's a primary error that all philosophy chooses to make right at the beginning of its enterprise in order to do this set-up shop at all. Like the perversions of the laws of physics by everything started with the Big Bang. I'll rest it there. Philosophical discourse is mental and verbal masturbation. Oh, absolutely, it is masturbation. You see, because there is a pun here and it's going to be auto-poetic. It is completely out of yourself. There is no union with the other. The other is what you are trying to get to. It is within and you're looking without. That's what we're saying, all is within. And so think about it like that when we say auto-poetic and philosophical discourse then being mental and verbal masturbation. I take a little bit of that language there from Charlie, Freak Sense TV. You can hear a lot of many of these coming into this work, so I do hope you'll be penny dropping moments there. So the orgasmic, the spasm of the orgasm going within and going back up the spine to there, the cross, Mary and Joseph, 3 days, pineal gland, ping, amazing. It's not all written like that now. It's been put into a different way again. The pineal, the pine tree, the presence under the tree, the energy going up, the star on the top, the way that it's laid out. So it's completely out of yourself. There is no union with the other. The other is what you're always trying, seeking to get, to find, searching outside, not looking within to find your Godhead. And the other is a common term in these literatures. The other is what which cannot be fully known. I always like to quote the British enzymologist JBS Houdrain, who made a wonderful statement. He said to the universe, he said, the universe is not only stranger than we suppose, it is stranger than we can suppose. That's a dizzying perception. It is one thing to think it's very strange. It's quite another thing to realise that it is stranger than you can ever suppose. You may suppose and suppose and suppose, and you will fall so far short of the mark that it will be absurd. That's what it means to be in the presence of a mystery, you see. The modern word mystery translates to unsolved problem. That's not what a mystery is. Okay, Scooby fans, mystery gang here. A mystery is not an unsolved problem. A mystery is a mystery, and a ratiocination. It's not a word I often use. A ratiocination can exhaust itself and make no progress with it. That's what's at the core of our being. That's what was at the core of this ancient perception. These were thoroughly modern people back then. There was modern people back then. They were shoved up against the same things that tug at our hearts right now, at our conscious mental, quandaries that we see in our minds and our souls. Beyond that, there's not a whole hell of a lot that you can say about it. This is an idea that will not die. Its practitioners, they end up in the footnotes. They do not have a happy fate. Like Pazio says, like we say, you don't make many friends. It's something people don't want to hear. It contradicts a great, massive cult called Christianity, Catholic Christians and so forth and etc. Certainly Ulrich Bergson with his idea of the Elon Vital. This is an effort to preserve this idea of the world soul, and yet you know the fate of the of person. His influence on modern society philosophy is certainly minimal. There is a man called Alfred North Whitehead. He's been referred to as the cat's pajamas by an American that I like to follow. That's Whitehead, and the university's not backing him up there. Whitehead is not taught really mainstream academically. Modern philosophy is a desert for what we can find right now. Nobody cares about it. Nobody's living their life according to the conceptualizations of modern philosophy. Not as far as we can see. Vitalism was this impulse in biology that persisted clear up until the 1920s with embryologists. Mechanical biology has been a great pains to suppress that. That's why Rupert Sheldrake is such a breath of fresh air. He can be seen as a person carrying the vitalist message back into science in his new book. Well, it's not new, it was new at the time, on the greening of science and nature. We'll put book there. It is nothing more than a manifesto for the recognition of the presence of the world soul, Gaia. Original people, not only the Native Americans but the tribes of the Amazon. If you live next to nature, it is such an overwhelming perception that it will never really be called into question. You get used to it. If you live like my mum and others that have got places next to a beach that overlook the sea and the sand and palm trees, beautiful nature, you get used to it. It becomes the norm. But if you're in a city and you're built up and you're penned in and you're a prisoner in your own concrete jungle, you miss nature and you are disconnected. You're disconnected from source energy, all right? So it's never called into question when you see it every day, but when you don't have it, you don't miss what you can't see. Well, I'd argue that you do. So you see, most of us will trace our civilizations back to desert dwellers, as we've seen in academic mainstream colonial history there, who invented agriculture, and agriculture then gave man surpluses. So we had to then build and defend with walled enclosures to defend our surpluses from starving neighbours outside of those walls. We're talking 6000 BC, Bronze Age, Palestine, Jericho, etc. for this kinds of stuff, and so on. We have been cut off from the natural ment and mind longer than any other group of people, I'd argue, on this realm right now. So bear that in mind with your current pandemic explosion. This is how we are able to carry out the demonic in the negative sense. The demonic reconstruction of the world we have right now. I'm echoing Hygieia and Rose and other such controversial videos that have been forced upon me, pandemic, etc., in the last 3 months. What we have done is, if there is a sin, then we've all sinned. It's happened, it's done. Robert Oppenheimer said beyond all rational arguments that physicists have known sin, and it's because they reached into the heart of the matter without reference, and their best trick was to call down the light that burns at the centre of the stars. They call it down to the test centres of our deserts and on the heads of enemies if necessary. There is a cosmic scene. It's an abomination. It is the story of Western civilization. The first great error was the invention of agriculture, admittedly. Seemingly, it was a pretty staggering bad turn. Then urbanisation, Pope Urban, urbanisation, and then a piece of bad luck that really didn't need to have to really befall upon man, which was the invention of the phonetic alphabet. That one. With the invention of the phonetic alphabet, we moved away from the symbolism and we lost even the symbolic connection to the world. That happened with the evolution of Demotic Greek, and even earlier languages will say linear A and B. In that kind of stuff, we'll go Josh X with the forthcoming of the monosyllabic, and we'll go with the Akhenaten, making the transition from many gods worship to one single god, that being the sun god Aten, and moving forward with Isis, Osiris and Horus, IHS, coming up at the end. McCullen talks a lot about this. I mean, we live in a universe so alienated that we can barely remember who we are, what we speak. We are a civilization with amnesia. We can barely conceive of the way back home, I'm afraid. No clicking of the heels in the red shoes is going to cut this one. So hopefully, archaeology, it's a wonderful thing. I mean, actually, when it's done properly, and not with the Smithsonian covering up, Andy, we're actually, as I said to you, digging into the stratigraphic layers of our past and reconstructing what hasn't been bombed, that is these ancient intellectual machines, and we are setting up their gears and we are turning them now to see how they work and click. Hopefully when man recovers from this amnesia, people who don't remember, when you are forgetful, you forget your way, the old way. This is the way. All right, man of law, Mandalorians, who we are and where we came from. We're just meandering through the darkness, the streets of our cities, foraging, scavenging in the bins, frightening other people. Yeah, if we could just wake up, archaeology, really and genuinely, and the rebirth of an awareness of the goddess, the omegas, the female, and the pushing of science to the point where its irrational foundations eventually become more clear. That'd be nice. And this is all part of a program of consciousness awakening, a paradigm, a thought, movement, an archaic revival that will then make man part of the living world rather than a disease, a parasitic force upon it. This refers to the theme of the importance of the imagination. Come with me. This is very important. Psychopaths and murderers and certain other types do not have this important loving part. Not just intellect and intelligence, but imagination, creativity is a key part there. And how the left and the right brain imbalances or balance, and the two becoming one into that consciousness. Shaolin and Tibetan mythologies bringing in there to the westernization. I think that that's where man's destiny lies, within that crux, the imagination. God is ever existent and makes manifest all else, but he himself is truly hidden because he is ever existent. We will say omnipotent. He manifests all things. I would argue that he wouldn't be a sex either. Where it's written he, a new one of the bits that I want to put would be it, they, not he, not she, no gender, but we just, it is not manifest. He himself brought into being in images presented through our senses, but he presents all things to us in such images. It is only things that are brought into being that are presented through sense. Coming into being is nothing else than the presentation through sense. This is so thoroughly modern, it's staggering. For 1,500 years, people really couldn't speak or say anything that clearly at all. It is evident then that he who alone is not come into being cannot be presented through sense. And that being so, he is hidden from our sight. But he presents all things to us through our senses, and thereby manifests himself through all things, and in all things, and especially to those whom he wills to manifest himself. For though thought alone can see that which is hidden, see the documentary on the homepage, The Invisible Made Visible, boom, that ties in with this, done in such a way. I've so wanted to get to this point for such a long time. Excitement, I'm finding it hard to keep calm, and I'm going to look at the comments later. We'll re-interact and let you have time to digest this, but it isn't our planning to be here. We have found ourselves here, and everything seems to be clicking into place just at the right time, and things are being presented just at the right time that is not in our control, that isn't coincidence. All right, so bear all that in mind, and that's why I've told you and asked you to look at that documentary on the homepage there, Superhuman. For those that did, wow, I bet you're buzzing right now. If you're getting spiky, hairy things going on there when you think about stuff, you've just got connected. If you're getting little rushes down the back of your spine, you've just got connected. If you are spiky and glowing and like the ready breath man and feeling a strange sense of euphoria and contentment, happiness, then you have just been connected. If you are not happy and think I'm some kind of pagan occult worshipper full of BS and here just to glorify my own needs and to vexate and aggravate, you haven't connected, and you need to do further work. And for you, I will pray, and we'll see you at the finish line, I hope. So in all things, for those for thought alone can see that which is hidden, in as much as thought itself is hidden from sight, and even the thought which is within you is hidden from your sight. How can he, being in himself, be manifested to you through your bodily eyes? But if you have power to see with the eyes of the mind, then my son, then my daughter, he will manifest himself to you. For the Lord manifests himself ungrudgingly throughout all of the universe as per them laws. And you can behold God's image with your eyes. You don't need to go and see the Vicar of Christ and pay Holy Communion and say your Hail Marys and beat yourself and wait for access to be granted. Oh, no, no, no. This is when I say we rewrite and we recode and we're going into the jet stream of the quantum. This is just scratching of the surface. This is just a little, hello, we're getting a bit of Christianity, we're getting a bit of Romans, we're getting a bit of Africa, we're getting a bit of Persia, we're getting a bit of this, and we're mixing it up, and we're coming out. Josh X and I are going to write a publication, and this is going to be expanded upon by minds as such things, and I can't wait for the end of next year for when that may be something like halfway done. Can you Adam and Eve it? By accident, by the universe orchestrating like the orchestra, and what I said in the video with the chorus and the chorus, it's making my head, and if it's doing it to me, then I don't know what it's doing to the ones on the other screen and the spirits within. You can behold God's image with your eyes and lay hold on it with your hands. To my mind, this is the permission for the psychedelic experiences that we've seen out of body, that we may hold the image of the ineffable through the eyes of this eye. Only with the middle eye will you see it. You will not see it with these eyes. If you wish to see Creator, think on the sun, think on the course of the moon, think on the order of the stars. The sun is the greatest of the gods, and we've gone through the Egyptian and the rebirth and the sun and the heliocentric bibliotech, sun, bibliotech. We've got a lot of work, groundwork has been done there. So the sun, the greatest of the gods in the skies of heaven, to him as their king and overlord. Who is the greatest of the Egyptian gods? You've got Amen-Ra, is it not? Who is the sky sun god? What is the name of, other than a 10 given to? I know there are different ones, but generally, Amen. Thank you. There you go. Moving on. And yet to this mighty God, greater than earth and sea, submits to have smaller stars circling above him. Who is it then, my son, that he obeys with reverence in awe? Each of these stars too is confined by measured limits and has an appointed space to range in. The pathways and the solar sun lumen, they've been showing you pictures, they have been proven. FPV Angel and all of the fam and clansmans there have shown you what have they shown you? Chariots of fire, cherubims, lunar, the luminaries themselves, the quantum particle angelic matrix, the chariots of fire in themselves. So why do not all the stars in heaven run like an equal courses? Who is it that assigned to each its place and marked out each for the context of the extent of its course? Here is an amazing modern anticipation of modernity, that they were not possible for you to grow wings and soar into the air. Would they were not possible? David, what have you written? I told you it needs, this is just a test read, it will be perfected. Were it not possible, it's just, sorry. Were it not possible for you to grow wings and soar into the air, poised between earth and heaven, you might see the solid earth, the fluid sea, and the streaming rivers, the wandering air, the penetrating fire, the courses of the stars, and the swiftness of the movement with which heaven encompasses all. What happens were that my son to see all these borne along with one impulse, and to behold him who is unmoved moving in all that moves, and him who is hidden made manifest through his works. This is an image of the planet seemed, from outer space. It would look, it's absolutely the unified image of our realm. And I think the central image in this early Hermetic description is the underlying unification, that this is as close to an image of what Godhead is that they were able to reach. This is a shamanic flight, out of body experience that delivers a scientific description of the earth moving in space. And it was written AD 150 in book 5 of the Corpus Hermetica. Nobody had that insight until we reach Giordano Bruno. And if you read Giordano Bruno in the Hermetic tradition, you know that Bruno was burned at the stake. What? He was. Allegedly, it says, so history reads. And the reason he was burned at the stake, why was he burned at the stake? Because most of you won't have heard of Giordano Bruno. You've heard of Giorgio and other such names as. Well, he looked up to the sky, the heavens, and he did not see the stellar shells and the angelic hierarchies. Bruno had a mystical experience, and when it was over, he said the universe is infinite. Infinite. The stars, they go on forever. That single statement was just the intellectual dynamite that destroyed the whole medieval Hellenistic, the entire previous cosmological vision was left behind. That single statement, it was such a powerful statement. He had to go to the stake, and he had to go and pay for that, and we've never recovered from that preconception, I would say, or perception. It was a fundamental perception, and it occurred because he looked without precondition into the night sky. He did not see wheels and demons and angels and shells of cosmic fate and necessity, where is his imagination is what he used. And it's where is there infinite space, infinite time? The stars are hung like lamps hung like a bird, hung like lamps unto the utmost regions of infinity. Hung like a bird. Just something, sorry. And then this inaugurates the beginning of modernity, and it's a perception that arose on the foundation of all of this earlier thinking. There was much secrecy around this, and what we have at the philosophical discourses, and then when we talk about alchemy, we will see that there the technique becomes projection onto matter. Dr. Masaru Emoto, the rice water experiment for one there, again, that you messages from water, that you enter into a kind of self-hypnosis, meditative states there, all right, transcendental meditation, whereby having these what we call naive ontological categories, in other words, not being sure exactly of how much of mind is in physical matter and how much matter is in physical mind. You can erase the boundary between self and world and project the contents of the unconscious into the chemical processes. Again, Superhuman backs all of this up with readings on the front pages of splspro.com. You will find what I'm reading about presented to you in a visual form. So whichever way you want to digest this, you're gonna digest it, and it is our pleasure and honour. Now, what went on in the early phase here, we do not know. The Hermetic or the Trismegistic hymns are largely, as you see them and find them, philosophical discourses. Here was stress on diet and purity. Asceticism was a type of hermetical approach. In Gnosticism, one went one of several ways. There were schools of Gnosticism which were vegetarian and puristic. If you have any little ones around, you might want to put your headphones in or turn it down. I'm going to mention something which may not be for little ears. You have been warned. They felt that man was no part of the universe, all right? That man was somehow hermetically sealed, if you will, sealed against contamination from the universe, separate too. Some Gnostic schools said you can do anything you want. You only live once, all right? YOLO. Do as you want. I'm loving it. Just do it. You can have any kind of sexual arrangement you want. You can do anything you want. Now, they do not think that they're part of the universe. You do not have... You have Gnostic schools side by side, some orgiastic and some quasi-tantric and some aesthetic. They were Gnostic sects, you see, because the idea was that light was trapped into matter by the act of procreation. There were Gnostic sects that only practiced forms of sexual union that could not lead to conception. What would that be? This is why I said to turn it down, or to remove the little ones, or to walk into another room where there aren't little ears. There were presumably exclusively homosexual sects. They were sects that only practiced anal intercourse, and for them, notice how I've worded that, yes, and for them that was the same as celibacy. I didn't say same-sex anal intercourse. I don't want to hang around here too long. I don't want to hang around this area at all, hanging around anals. Which only practice anal intercourse, and for them that was the same as celibacy. It wasn't a perversion, it had a logical, I'm not backing it up, I'm just bringing it, do not shoot the messenger, because the real concern was not to trap any more of the light. Okay, moving on. I don't seriously advocate this, and I think in our current situation a little dose of this kind of thinking probably wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, too much light is trapped in the organic matrix, and so these Gnostic sects, for instance, were exclusively homosexual or exclusively practiced anal intercourse. I won't argue, you will find I've done a bit of digging. Of course, they were indeed suicide sects. SECTS. They disappeared very quickly, you'll note, because they could only make converts by a missionary conversion. What was that? They could only... A missionary. We've heard of missionaries before and missionary conversions, haven't we? Just pause that and pin that one there with your current day missionaries, all right? I'm not a missionary ever. Missionary position now, okay, and certain things within the... I know, who would have thought? Moving on. You didn't have children, all right, in that game. You couldn't hand this on, because it was a bit like the suicide jihad type ones of today now. It shows, how thorough their rejection of the world was, how broken their ment was, how contaminated they felt themselves to be by this material world. You also had... There's a faith out there where it makes you think that you're the only one in existence and everything else is not there, and so you can do anything. I can't think of that faith. There's a name that's coming, it's escaping. I've been trying to get it for 5 minutes, but as I'm talking through this, I'm thinking on, I can't seem to, but if anyone can name that faith where you are the sole creation center point of the universe, a bit like that needs to be added into here. You also had, as we mentioned, these optimistic schools that saw nature as something to be perfected and said man has to be set on the earth, you know, not to reject it, but to be to perfect it. Man has been set on the earth, comma, David. We'll go to a new line. Not to reject it, but to perfect it. I am incarnate into this reality to help, inspire, save, and raise humanity. Do not reject it, perfect it. Yes. Isn't that rolling off the tongue? Think responsibly is going to be put underneath that. Constant evolution. And utopianism, the belief that one can create a perfect society. It goes back into these hermetical ideals, because the idea was that a perfect society could be the goal of the alchemical works if we'd been allowed to carry on that path. Let me read you a passage from Giordano Bruno. We've heard so much of him, let's hear of some of his works. As we get into the end of this document, page 38 of 40, I know, sad times, I am starving. It is now 5:30. I'm going to see you later with Brother Kevin, and we will reflect on a great many things in that Sunday session. No, I didn't see you last night. I fell asleep. You didn't get a message or any notification, but how much of this is a give back to you on the bonus bank holiday weekend of Augustus. So this is a wonderful passage from the Picatrix. Remember the Picatrix? This was a book of magical, we say about approximately 12th century magical texts that began to introduce these hermetic ideas. Now think of King Arthur. Think of what he was proclaimed to have done. This passage is the core passage that inspired the Rosicrucians and numerous other utopian movements. I know. Francis Yates, all right, and we've got this book will be getting uploaded to the .com. Hermes Trismegistus is often mentioned as the source for some talismanic images, and in other connections, talismanic comes from Asia, Asia Minor, and other such places you will find. But there is in particular one very striking passage in the 4th book of Picatrix, in which Hermes is stated to have been the first to use magical images and is credited with having founded a marvellous city in Egypt. And here is the passage from Picatrix. There are among the Chaldeans very perfect masters in this art, and they affirm that Hermes was the first one who constructed images by means of which he knew how to regulate the Nile against the motion of the moon. This man also built, I would argue he's not a man, but this man also built a temple to the sun. Sun worship, Sunday, okay, worship, and he knew how to hide himself from all. That would be monotheistic, one God worship, so that no one could see him, although he was within it. Now, those of you that are scholars of Rosicrucianism, you will know that one of the things that has always been said about Rosicrucians is what? That they are invisible. That is how Robert Flood proved to people that he was not a Rosicrucian, saying, "You're looking at me, so how can I be one?" He is in the temple, but he could not be seen within it. It was he, Hermes Trismegistus too, who in the east of Egypt constructed a city 12 miles long, within it which he constructed a castle which had 4 gates in each of its 4 parts. On the eastern gate he placed the form of an eagle. On the western gate, the form of a bull. On the southern gate, the form of a lion. And on the northern gate, he constructed the form of a dog. In these images, he introduced, we'll go there later, I know I can hear you, but I've got to get on. Into these images, he produced spirits. Into these images, he introduced spirits, which spoke of with voices, nor could anyone enter the gates of the city except by their permission. There he planted trees, in the midst of which was a great tree, which bore the fruit of all generation. On the summit of the castle, he caused to be raised a tower. that was 30 cubits high, on top of which he ordered to be placed a lighthouse, the colour of which changed every day until the seventh day, of which it returned to the first colour. I've spelt that with no U. Wow, is that? Look at this autocorrect. Stop it. Colour. I'll let you guess what colours they may exchange themselves through and from. The city was illuminated with these colours. Near the city there was an abundance of waters, which dwelt many kinds of fish. Around the circumference of the city he placed engraved images and ordered them in such a manner that by their virtual inhabitants were made virtuous and withdrawn from all wickedness and harm. The name of the city was Augustine. Magic, life, consciousness and deathly conduct regarding titles I'm moving to now. You know, we've brought out little bits of the hospital and the certificate of live birth, and to get medical records and certain things like that. We've looked at the hospital, maternity, the registrar, the registration, the surgeon general and the sister of these military wards. Well, what we haven't mentioned recently is a little bit of information that was given to me 3 years ago by a sister called Sarah from Facebook that shocked the sugar out of me. Again, if you've got little ones or you're in earshot of little blood, I would like you to go somewhere else a minute. If you are slightly disturbed about the occultism with death and entities and fictions and that, I'd urge you not to listen anymore. This is quite a darker side of the military wards, hospital registrar, the surgeon general and the sister and the midwife and the registrar. The certificate of live birth you're going to find out in your level 2 of the SMG and further publications is regarding the what? The placenta and the umbilical cord, alright? Human, person, monster is where we go there, legal definitions, which we've covered before. This is not new under the sun, but it needs re-saying again in light of what I've just brought you and led you up to. The final nail in the coffin, to bring it into 2020, nail in the coffin, didn't mean that, just came. This is achieved through the conversion, acts, deeds, criminality of the name, the Father's name in vain, the biblical reference that we've brought to you time and time again, the code switching, the code breach, the undoing of God's laws here. All right, so good Lord, when you've got the certificate of live birth, it's not for anything special. What you get in there is their reference to the placenta and the umbilical, and I've printed recently about the definitions of books and dictionaries and words, and Alterius Exclusiva, which is the inclusion of birth includes stillbirth, it excludes birth, and I'm going to expand upon this later, as well as the dictionaries, the definitions, the inclusion, I feel sick, I really do. So it needs reiterating with everything that I've just put there, and the alchemy, and this is where the mental alchemy and the dark side and the death and the Egyptian and the book of the dead, the occultist, the secret, the surgeon general, the military, the church, the war, the language, the tool, the unspoken, the unspeakable. We will speak the unspeakable, and it appears these lot, have got it like that, yet to be confirmed as a fan. The undoing of God's laws, we'll leave it there. So the certificate of live birth is reference to mum giving birth. Let's continue on. It's been done by the hospital, the registrar, the midwives. The person is created as a human person. You'll find your legal implied meanings and definitions. Go Oxford, go Merriam's, go Black's. Made of the umbilical cords and the placenta. The person that is born of the mother alone, entirely birthed by mother, ships and birthing, products of conception, hospital, delivery room, all right? There is no father in this case, all right, at all. The nanny state takes on the role. The umbilical cord and the placenta, no father. It's a piss take of the Christian set up there as well. Immaculate conception, no father, if you think about it. Human person, we brought you the second coming at the General Registry Office. Again, don't take fun in this. It's not my work. It's not my doing. It's our discovery and consciousness as indigos, light workers, rainbows, and little shizens that just won't let go. You wouldn't let it lie, said Uncle Vic on his big night out, and we haven't let it lie. The second coming we would consider then at the registration with the GRO and the citizenship being born. So the Immaculate Conception is that bit that I've just read. I don't want to repeat it. It makes me feel sick. Human person, you know, a monster. Power over title from God the Father would be then usurped. Think Egyptian, all right. And what I said earlier now, Horus, born of Set, the dark horse. Indigo Hotel Sierra. Where have you seen IHS? Isis, Horus, Set. See my previous public posts, videos, documents, writings. You know, others are clocking onto this recently, other channels, and I'm trying to make some new links and some forging. I have sent a message to Life in the Mix, and I've asked to have a private podcast offline, probably with me and Kevin, or maybe we could go private and do a live one once we've got to know each other, and do that via the .com. And channels like that I'm extremely interested in. Proper Boa Tully, if we could make that consciousness connection. So we remind you of the stillbirth and the definition and the implied meaning. Born alive being the product of conception. I've seen that written by first-hand knowledge of that in medical terms, as many of you have. After complete expulsion or extraction from mother, irrespective of the duration of pregnancy, which breathes or shows any other evidence of life, such as breathing, such as beating of the heart, pulsation of the umbilical cord, or definite movement or involuntary muscles. Whether or not the umbilical cord has been caught or the placenta is attached, each product of such birth is considered live born. This is the legal definition, you know, one of them. They're on Black's Law 10. They keep changing these dictionaries, implied meanings, and you know, you need to look at the year of the act to go to the particular dictionary of that year to understand the definition of that act. Don't be using a 2000 and 1980 to look at something written in 1940s. You know, and we've got some years in those of you that have taken advantage and downloaded the free Last Will and Testament, the powers of attorney, and etc. we've given to you, each and every man, to protect you for free. Your basic 101 foundation key competence, Sovereign Masters Guild bronze, we call that the foundation level key competence. You will notice the various laws and references, land, wills, acts, and etc. So we're looking at the years of segregation with the United Kingdom acts, you know, like we've accidentally found the Cancer Act on our discovery. 1801, there was a change of titles to the occupational franchise, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. 1837, you will notice on them documents we've given you about the wills, pardon me, land and acts there. And don't remember the biblical and the legal revelations of land, man and land, hand in hand, like debt and death, all right. 1902, we've got the Midwife Act, the birth certificate registration, and the informing transfer of title, one being the principal, the crowned at birth, all right. This writing is terrible, I'm embarrassed. Crowned as you are born, sorry, not at birth, I just done a crowned as born from the waters of mum, all right. You are crowned, you're king, you as king, you're principal by being here and put into this realm and environment. You are then the principal of that paperwork that subsequent follows through the non-disclosure, which then is floated and high frequency traded on stock markets, going back to 1066, 1067, land tenure, and what we've brought to you by William the Conqueror, and 1066, then the 1300s and the Onum Sanctum and the subsequent Bulla Papils that come down from that, CQVs and certain things. When I put that comment on Life in the Mix's video saying I can give you some answers, we can as a fan. Incredible energies, pal. Mucka. What else have I got now then? Shifted from the position of beneficiary executive in offers, leaves one in the position of legal trustee with possessory title only. Legal trust with possessory title only, that means you're paying, you're responsible for all claims, you know, legally made in relation to charges against your estate and trust, that being the name that you would claim through your own volition. Beware, it's a secured party creditor across the pond to our friends there, subjugating secured party creditor, SPC. that's the end. All right, so Christianity and Hermeticism, the prophecies, the prophetic way that we look at things, those that prophesize, and that's just a scratch of the surface. That's at least 30 to 40 years worth of research. I've dropped a lot of names in there. Apologies for the tuth and the pronunciation on this Sunday, the 30th of August 2020, but I feel the universe is reveling now. That wasn't perfect, and it's version 1. It's very much of a skeleton, 40 pages, 13,821 words if you are playing me back and recording through dictaphone and typing it out and making a document. Wait, and we'll give it you, and it'll all be polished and pictured, and versions, you know, will come. If you want to help writing this, you want to add anything and all of our documents, you get in touch and let us know, and we will consider that. We accept everything. Whether we believe it or not is another story. Well, you know, we have to go and check. But that, I think, the consciousness and the universe in itself, this energy imbibed in, you know, into this ontology of, is going to be happy with that. But there's a lot more. There's so many books, and you know, you've got a lot of fantastic areas to look at. I will leave it there. I'm very hungry. The afternoon is gone and I'm doing a video later, so maybe we'll come back about 10 p.m. tonight, this channel, myself and Kev. If you enjoyed that, a thumb up, a share, and yes, I will say hello. I'll have a quick look out of respect. Some publications coming out. You see when it goes quiet and I don't show up, it's because we're deep in, deeper than deeper, and I got stuck in a loop the other day. I got into a thought and I couldn't get out of it. It was late in the morning, and it was a weird place to be when you don't have an answer and you're waiting and searching. And yes, alias Jerry, Lisa, go mad. I'll look at the comments through the channel later as well. These will be saved and re-put back up once the video's recoded, so I'll just shout your names and then I'll get the comments after on a replay. Osman, who was that? Stoville Elohim Ra. Oh, Stovilla, now you're a cosmic mind. I still want to have a chat with you if possible, and that would be good. You are, I don't know what you thought of me. I'm sorry for my energy and giddiness, but I liked your attitude, your energy, your information. Bang on point, my son. URC. I'm glad I had a look at the comments. That's made my heart smile. Across the pond, consciousness. Don't think, feel, Bruce Lee. Came on. I like that one. Learn from the best and make your own style. That's what Bruce Lee said. That's exactly what we've done there. Learn from the breast. No, we fed from the breast. Then we learn from the best, and then we make our own style. Thank you for that. That's exactly what we're at. And you're all invited to edit and put in oi oi Savalai or some. I'm looking through your names as well as your comments. I'm trying to be quick. NWO, nice one to see you there. We'll speak soon. Sorry about the scattiness of it all. This is that document that I was writing yesterday, finishing off, perfecting when I didn't answer the phone. NWO, so thank you. Palladian, keys to the living library. Thank you a ton. Thank you, dear David. You're welcome, sister. Lisa, Martin, thank you. You're welcome. It's my pleasure and privilege. We lead the game in many ways, but we lead the game because we take the time to collect, double check, interface, name, reference, Santos, Jordan, Alan Watts, Napoleon Hill. There's too many to mention. Greg Braden and the Divine Matrixes, and there's another man that I always forget alongside Greg, that's, you know, so yeah, it's us. It's a reflection of man's effort. Everybody that's put something into the area of the public domain, of the archives, then, you know, the white light has arrived. Bless you all. It's been an honor and a privilege. I bow before ye, and I'll give you a little namaste. Much love. Quantum Kingmaker fist bumps. We'll see you later. All right, thank you.